Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here to the Eurogas Annual Conference. Indeed, achieving the EU 2040 climate targets and looking at the role of gaseous energy. We've got an absolute wonderful lineup of experts to take us through three very interesting panels. And before we do that, we have a set of very important speakers who are going to be taking us through their own views on what the latest Commission projections of 2040 mean. And we're very lucky that we'll be starting with a welcome speech from the Vice President of Eurogas and the CEO of GasTerra, Annie Krist. Please, Annie, take the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. Due to the absence of Didier Holleaux, I, as the Vice Chair of Eurogas, am very delighted to welcome you all at this Eurogas Annual Conference. And I'm very pleased with the large number of participants today. Especially, I would like to say on behalf of Eurogas, a big thank you to our panelists, speakers, and participants from the Commission, MEPs, and Member State representatives. The annual conference of today takes place in the context of the recently agreed gas and hydrogen decarbonization package, which sets the framework for the development of renewable and low-carbon gases. It sets the first rules for a hydrogen market, and we in Eurogas believe that this will create consistency and a coherent approach, and we hope and trust this will be of help in making the transition to a sustainable hydrogen value chain, make it less bumpy than it would be definitely without such a set of rules. And speaking about bumpy rides, we've gone through heavy storms after the invasion of the Ukraine by Russia and the resulting energy crisis. European measures like storage targets and obligations, market correction mechanisms, and aggregate EU were introduced to fill the supply gap. At the same time, we had to be aware that those measures would not become permanent and hinder proper market functioning in the future. And I believe that we as Eurogas have been quite successful in engaging in and contributing to these key policy files. And in Europe, we've learned an important lesson. Reliance on only one energy supplier isn't exactly the best thing to do. Let us not make the same mistakes in relying on only one energy carrier to deliver our climate goals. The supply gap and the extreme price volatilities obviously did not distract Eurogas's attention from the very important issue of decarbonization. We've succeeded in a better understanding of mid-term and long-term role of all gases and technologies such as biomethane, CCS, and hydrogen. We supported targets for the development of renewable and low-carbon gases. And in fact, we would have welcomed binding targets, because we believe gas industry holds immense potential to drive positive change in the energy landscape. And this will become even more important given ongoing global warming and climate targets for 2040 and 2050. The European Commission has recently launched its 2040 strategy, aiming for 90% carbon emission reductions. It's highly ambitious, and it will not be achieved without decarbonization of gaseous energies. The role of gases in the scenario are perhaps lower than we might have expected, seeing a fall in ambition on hydrogen from 20 megatons in 2030 in the Power EU to just 3 megatons in 2030 under the 2040 strategy. In Eurogas, we will bring forward our own proprietary study, which will examine what other possibilities could be for gaseous energy. Our theme today, the role of gaseous energy, highlights the pivotal role gas plays in the sustainable journey, particularly in buildings and the transportation sector. And these two are most difficult to decarbonize. From reducing emissions in the transportation sector to providing efficient and reliable energy solutions for buildings, gaseous energy offers a sustainable path forward. Or, to put it the other way around, we are convinced that decarbonization of both sectors will require the use of gaseous fuels in 2040 and beyond. In fact, taking an approach to allow all renewable energies, all low-carbon energies, to support the decarbonization of the energy system is an approach we in Eurogas fully support. Thank you again for being here today. I wish you all to be part of a lively and interesting debate. Let's get the best out of this conference and meet all the challenges that will definitely be ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Annie. And indeed, yes, we can say that we are very interested in how the debate will unfold today as we look at the role of gaseous energies to 2040 and in those specific sectors that you mentioned. These are indeed areas where we do see a great need of attention and are probably two of the biggest CO2 emitting sectors still in the European Union today. So yes, I think you don't need too many of my segues because we're just delaying them if I keep them going too long. I will, without further ado, be very happy to welcome for the keynote speech Matthew Baldwin, the Deputy Director General of DG ENER, somebody we've been working with for the last couple of years on things like demand aggregation, joint purchasing, but I expect today you have a lot more to tell us than that specific element. Matthew, thank you for joining us, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much indeed. Great to be back with Eurogas. We have a really useful dialogue with you. It's very direct, it's very frank, and so it's frankly very useful for us. And we don't always agree, hold the front page. But therein lies its true value, because I think through these kinds of precise exchanges and through James and your team, but also your industries, it's extremely useful to us as we go through these challenging times. I asked you, James, what you wanted me to do. You said I had to be lively, interesting, and witty. Well, on behalf of the European Commission, I would like to update you briefly on where we've got to in terms of our next steps towards climate neutrality by 2050, including the crucial 2040 process. I'll try to explain a bit what that is and what it is not. Update you a bit on where we've got to on the energy platform, demand aggregation and all that jazz, and also a bit on methane. And I'll try to do so in my remaining 8.5 minutes. I'll spare you the speech, because I think you all know it by heart, on the European Green Deal and the crucial commitment to climate neutrality by 2050, a binding target under this law. Annie, you said you wanted binding targets. We have plenty. We've got a binding target also for the net reduction of at least 55% in greenhouse gases by 2030. If you like, we can here and now make the 2040 targets binding. No, I don't hear any takers. But more seriously, we have published a communication on that with the recommendations for a 90% net greenhouse gas emission reduction by 2040. And that triggered a discussion process with all stakeholders. And to do so, we have put our modeling on the table. And again, this is the what it is and what it is not bit. These provide us, based on the assumptions of implementation of the Fit for 55 package, projections, not targets, not even forecasts at this stage, but projections based on this implementation of where we can expect to get to. And I think that's why the value is in, and always open to discuss the modeling, which of course is based on assumptions, about where we get to in the different sectors. How did we end up at that 90% net greenhouse gas emissions reduction recommendation? Firstly, on electrification of the economy. It's key to decarbonisation. We forecast a doubling of electricity production by 2040. renewable energy more generally must become the backbone of our energy system. I'm not going to go into everything we're doing there, whether it's on renewables or energy efficiency, on the grid action plan, or indeed on the broader competitiveness discussion, including, of course, ensuring that that works also for the key components in our energy transition, such as batteries and hydrogen. All of that I step past for the moment. But depending on the scenarios we've set out in these impact assessments, and bearing in mind they are projections, subject to uncertainties, such as energy prices, such as geopolitical developments, and my goodness, there are plenty of uncertainties there, such as the actual pace of technological evolution and deployment of carbon capture and storage, biomethane, biogas production, and other clean technologies. That was a very long sentence, comma. Based on that, we project gaseous fuels to decrease by somewhere between 54 and 68% between 2020 and 2040. This reduction in natural gas will be partially compensated, we think is likely by an increase in biomethane, in biogas, and of course in hydrogen consumption. Homing in more specifically on the impact on natural gas. From a baseline of 400 billion cubic meters in 2019, we expect a need for around 215 billion cubic meters by 2030, and a slightly wider forecast, somewhere between 125 and 185 BCM by 2040. Gas clearly remains part of our energy mix in the future, in fact, all the way through to 2049, but clearly also at a reduced level, and I'll come to this later, we hope in an increasingly clean form. Secondly, we presume that the production and consumption of clean hydrogen beyond the traditional applications manifests much more in the EU energy system and contributes to the decarbonizing of a hard-to-abate sector. We know that the hydrogen market is nascent, that renewable hydrogen is a rarely observed species, but we project, however, at this stage, a scale up of hydrogen production to around 9 million tons by 2030, and up to somewhere between 75 and 100 million tons of oil equivalent by 2040. Thirdly, a sustainable alternative, which of course can be stored and distributed and used according to demand, biomethane and biogas, and we've had very useful discussions with Eurogas on this, can play a really significant role towards achieving our objectives. It's very promising that nearly all member states mention biomethane in their draft, and we're still pushing them, updated national energy and climate plans. France, for example, presents a very quickly growing biomethane market. The NECPs, Italy and Denmark both report very significant amounts of biomethane replacing natural gas. And this is all on top of what we said in Repower EU of the target to increase EU production of biogas to around 35 BCM by 2030, with a price tag, an investment foreseen of around 37 billion at that point. We think we can get to 35 BCM by 2030, but we're going to need to work together. So I hereby today invite you to join the Biomethane Industrial Partnership to jointly develop sustainable and indeed circular business models to elevate the current levels of production. Fourthly, and I will be brief again because I think many of you have heard us talk about this a lot, and you've referred to it, Annie, very eloquently. We can't separate, and we do not intend to separate, the energy transition from the issue of energy security, back to the holy trinity of energy policy. You very well highlighted what happened in the invasion and the different actions we've taken. Extraordinary times requiring extraordinary measures on diversification, on storage, on reduction of gas demand, and we very, very much welcomed the close cooperation with the gas industry throughout. But as you said, it really was a hard lesson for us to learn, and we must maintain our energy security, indeed reduce our dependency, and I think you see that coming out of the 2040 numbers too. We see a decline in imports and import dependency, particularly decreasing from around 60% in 2019 to around 30% by 2040. And in that respect, the EU Energy Platform has delivered a lot. We're very proud of what we've done. It was launched, of course, to support this diversification away from Russian sources of gas. We've come with Aggregate EU as an original mechanism, which required unprecedentedly intense cooperation with member states, with the industry. We are very grateful to all the feedback that Eurogas has given us throughout the process. Sometimes critical, sometimes very critical, but always constructive and looking at how we can do things. And please keep that up. Pleased to say, despite some of your darkest warnings, a number of companies have participated vigorously in the different Aggregate EU rounds, and we're keen to see that come. In total, we had 180 companies or so subscribed. We had in 2023 buyers expressing demand of well over 50 billion cubic meters and 48 sellers submitted offers of more than 60. We've been playing recently with a midterm product, again, because we listen sometimes to what the industry says. So this would enable up to 12 consecutive 6-month periods. And frankly, I was personally quite surprised at the scale of the response. We had sellers putting in around 97 billion cubic meters of possible supply into that mechanism. So this again is very promising for an evolution. And we're also looking on that basis then. Now we have got and achieved a permanent legal basis, and many thanks to the Parliament for that, for the hydrogen, under the hydrogen and decarbonised gas package. We are able to start thinking about demand aggregation and joint purchasing, focusing on other gases, hydrogen of course, but also as a part of our broader decarbonisation of our economy. And you will have heard what President Ursula von der Leyen said about using some of these tools to think about in terms of critical raw materials. Watch this space. In terms of the longer term, we've also just launched a dedicated survey addressed to market players, both buyers and suppliers, which closes on the 2nd of May, to test the interest of market participants in new products, more broadly in that context of security of supply and decarbonisation. Is there interest in new longer-term products as part of demand aggregation and joint purchasing, identifying new features that can support the progressive decarbonisation of energy contracts? And particularly in this context, we're also inviting your view on the possible involvement of methane reductions in that process, which brings me to the last thing I just wanted to touch on very briefly, where we've got to on that. And the philosophy behind all this is, as we hope to see markets starting to loosen up for gas in the second half of the decade, there's real scope for making the gas that we consume much, much cleaner. We've now got agreed just this week, finally adopted, the EU methane regulation, which tackles our domestic methane emissions, incentivizes methane emissions reductions globally. At the domestic level, it provides a binding framework for measurement, reporting and verification, leak detection and repair. And internationally, it starts to place new requirements on imports to guide the purchase of fossil fuels with lower methane emissions. For example, from the end of this year, importers will be required to provide quantitative and qualitative information on the methane emissions of their imported fossil fuels. Over time, the European Union and perhaps other gas buyers will be able to start choosing cleaner, lower methane related gas. And I think that's a very significant development. And it has the potential to impact the direction of travel of the gas industry. I hope you'll have the chance to talk about that today. We want to continue that discussion about that potential transition with you on a daily basis. Very quickly, we see the Oil and Gas Methane Partnership, probably better known by its acronym, OGMP 2.0, now has more than 130 energy companies signed up. We are looking to scale up financial support to accompany this movement, particularly granting access to developing countries, to capital to developing countries, which is why we committed to fund the Methane Finance Sprint. And we are leading together with the US negotiations on a non-binding framework for MMRV and a working group to try to establish a global full transparency in measurement and reporting of methane emissions as the basis for the global approach for methane reduction. And we anticipate significant progress on that over the course of this year. So it's been a rather rapid Cook's tour through what's going on issues related to the gas industry. I won't try to anticipate all the rich discussion you're going to have this afternoon, including with some of my colleagues. Many thanks for inviting us. Thanks for the continued strong relationship and frank speaking, and long may that continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. I think you did even more than I asked for. Indeed, I wouldn't say it was a Cook's tour, it was more of a tour de force. No, it was a tour de force through the world of gas. I think you touched on everything. But in so doing, you also reminded me that whilst I was hoping this would be a quieter year because we have the elections and the political change in the European Commission, you're reminding me that, of course, it's not. We have to be very busy implementation. Our colleagues in Eurogas are very busy running workshops on the implementation of the methane emission regulation. There will be lots and lots of work to do, so I better roll my sleeves back up again. But thank you, Matthew. Really appreciated it. And as you say, we have a good relationship and we don't necessarily all agree on everything, but that is the nature of being good partners. I am now very happy to say that we will have the next speech, which will be a recorded video, actually, because the Commissioner for Transport, Adina Vălean, couldn't join us this afternoon, but she has sent a transport-themed speech to us. I mention this because it's quite important. This is the first year that Eurogas has also represented gas use in transport, because the end of last year, the Natural Gas Vehicle Association was merged into Eurogas. So transport is a new area that Eurogas works on, and we take our commitment to that very seriously, and therefore we're very happy that the Commissioner for Transport has sent us this message.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for inviting me to join your event today. In our efforts to transform our economy and prepare it for a climate-neutral future, as EU Transport Commissioner, my focus has been on proposing policies to bring down CO2 emissions from transport while keeping our transport companies and economy at large competitive. Transport in the EU still produces roughly a quarter of all greenhouse gas emissions in the EU. But we are now on a clear path to change that. We have a clear regulatory framework providing certainty on increased recharging and refueling infrastructure for zero and low emission vehicles, and creating demand for cleaner fuels for aviation and maritime transport. The goal we have been entrusted with is a 90% reduction in transport emissions by 2050. We are on the track with this recharging infrastructure, but what about energy sources? Today, natural gas plays an important role in our transport system. In road transport, it is a mature technology used widely for long-haul lorries. It has also been playing a growing role in maritime transport, and it will remain important as a transitional fuel for the immediate future. Besides lower CO2 emissions, it also has the benefit of lowering dramatically the emissions of air pollutants. Looking ahead, gas has a growing role to play in the years to come, using CCS technologies, blending it with hydrogen and scaling up biomethane and bio-LNG will help us decarbonize faster. Bio-based gases are helping to diversify gas supply sources, boost EU energy independence, and reduce exposure to natural gas price volatility. With demand for biomethane increasing in other economic sectors, such as electricity generation and heating, we will need to rapidly upscale sustainable production. With REPowerEU, we want to produce 35 billion cubic meters of biomethane within the EU by 2030. This is almost 10 times our current level. This will not be achieved without clear priorities and good coordination, ensuring the most effective use of limited resources. But it also creates important business opportunities and prospect for growth for our companies. In transport, our priority for biomethane is to use it where it can have the greatest impact and where other decarbonization options are not yet ready available. This is the case in maritime transport, where it will still take time before zero-emission powertrains reach the market at scale. Hydrogen will be another part of the puzzle, indirectly to produce e-fuels for planes and ships, and directly to power vehicles that cannot run on electricity. With the help of our alternative fuels infrastructure regulation, we'll have a network of hydrogen refueling stations across the EU's TEN-T network and in urban nodes by 2030. Hydrogen, biomethane, electricity, e-fuels, there is no single bullet to cutting transport emissions and creating a more sustainable future for mobility. But if we make the most of the full range of technologies available and leave the industry is concerned to identify which technologies work best for them, we will be armed with all the solutions we need. I wish you fruitful discussions today.
And indeed, we're very happy to receive the message, and I would say that we align very closely on many of the points that were mentioned by Commissioner Vălean, and do see the role and growing role of gaseous fuels, especially as we go forward in maritime and heavy-duty vehicles. And indeed, this remains a very important end use for gas now and for the future. At this point, it is my great pleasure to thank the people who make this conference possible. We really are very grateful to those organizations who are working with us in partnership, who are supporting us, who are in cooperation with us to develop and deliver this very important annual conference. And I must say thank you first to CEFE, whose CEO, Egbert Lage, is here with us today, who will be taking part in the first panel on the gas industry in 2040 and beyond. I would also say thank you very much to A2A, who are in cooperation with us, who have Francesco Boresti, who is the Director of Smart Infrastructure and Business Unit, who will be taking us through the transition in buildings. And of course, finally, and last but not least, Nelly Nicoli, the CEO of LNG, who will be here to talk about gas in transport in the final panel. But I start by saying thank you very much to Landwärme, one of Europe's most important biomethane companies, a really strong partner of Eurogas, member of Eurogas for many years now, and we work very closely together and help, I think, each other to promote biomethane quite successfully. And we're very, very, very pleased that the CEO of Landwärme, Zoltan Elek, is here with us today. And Zoltan, we'd be very happy to hear your spotlight on European carbon removal strategies and negative emissions with renewable gases. Well, it says today, and we can say now. Zoltan, the floor is yours.
So it's very nice to see that what biomethane is covered so strongly. And 5 years ago, I think we were in a complete different world and more all electric and very much focusing on just one single source of energy or one carrier of energy. And I think this shift is very important because still hydrogen and renewable energy, electricity will play a big role. But we have to integrate all the opportunities which are out there, and biomethane is one of them. And this is the vision which is driving us. As somebody coming from the practical side in the market, somebody who's doing innovations, I'm going to talk about. And we have sustainable sources of biomethane. We have sustainable sources of methane. And we have to use them, because using them means often also avoiding methane emission, taking the manure to the fermentation, taking the biowaste to the fermentation, is at the same time avoiding methane emissions, which we have to cut really quickly to work on net zero. And we have the infrastructure, and I think this is very important because methane has the infrastructure in place. Hydrogen needs an additional infrastructure. So at this point, why not work with something we have already in place where we can use the investments we did in the last decades? And I think the one point we already heard, biomethane can come with negative emissions, and it should come. And I think this is very important. And we set the first moves in that area. We have started our own project where we do carbon capture and storage. And you can do it on the small scale, so it doesn't have to be a big project in the North Sea. We are storing currently mineralizing CO2, which we capture at a plant in Dresden in Germany, and mineralize it in recycled concrete, which is then used as gravel in roadworks. And this is something which is happening today and is completely decentral. It's low tech. Well, it has to be managed, but it's something which takes place. It's just on that plant, we are capturing over 1,000 tons of CO2 already today. And it's viable and it works. And you can copy, paste, and put it in every other biomethane plant we have in Europe. So these are approaches which work today, and this should be something that we should look at. Because we need negative emission, and I think most of us know that net zero will not be enough, so we need approaches where we can go beyond, because the target is not just get net zero, we have to rebalance the carbon cycle. to save the planet. And this is a bigger challenge. This is something which is going to be the decades beyond 2050, beyond 2040, but we should keep that in mind. And I think if we talk about methane and application where we still use it, we should really focus on application which are also not just on the production side, but also on the usage side, CCS ready. A power plant built today can be already CCS ready, can include carbon capture and storage, and we then later switch it on biomethane or some other renewable methane source, then this is really capturing CO2 out of the atmosphere. And this is something where we could also see in transportation. Imagine a ship, and we're gonna show technology currently more on the stationary level, but we're implementing at one of our sites fuel cells which run on methane, and at the end there's just a pure CO2 stream coming out of it, so it's CCS ready. And this is something which can be also implemented on a ship. So it leaves the harbor with LNG, and it comes back with liquid CO2 after 5,000 miles going around. So this is something where we don't have to electrify every approach, every part of the business. But looking at the framework today, well, we have great visions, and we have the Commission set up really great targets, and we have 35 BCM target, also combined with 10 million tons of green hydrogen. These are good targets, but you know, if we look at one level down, we see already the challenges. If we take out gaseous fuels on the heavy-duty market, this is something which can be the pulling part, bringing biomethane into the market. And if we take that out, this is challenging. If we lose the member states, and a lot of member states haven't put up any targets for biomethane, haven't pushed that industry. So we are very much losing out on the member level, on the lower level, and we don't fix that, we are not able to reach the targets which were set for 2030. So we need more implementation. We have to really focus also on the implementation on the national level, so the speed gets up and we see it right. And if we do 35 BCM of biomethane, let's do it right. Let's really focus on the sustainable, the right economics, create a plain level field, be CCS ready, really combine negative emissions into that, because this is one chance. If we invest now, let's do the investment right and not change the way we build the plants in 5 years again. And I think at the end, really to see that we have a good market which is integrated, which allows us to work. And just a little bit from the market side, 1 year ago, we won a case against Germany. So we have been fighting for importing biomethane from Denmark and other neighboring countries for the German fuel markets. Until then, German regulation said, yeah, it's allowed to use foreign biomethane, but just if it's transported on the road to Germany and not via pipeline. So this is something, and now it's changing the markets, because now we are able to source European-wide, and we're able to source from biomethane plants in countries which have no subsidies in place, from the Baltic countries, but also every Eastern European countries. We're starting to source from Spain to Germany, from Italy to Germany. So this is something which can drive markets, which can help accelerate the whole system. Just because a market which has a good demand, and especially the fuel market has a good demand, there is a high willingness to pay, can be the very important driver for that business, but we need a level playing field, we need clear targets, and that's what we're going to see in the next years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Zoltan. Fully agree. And I think one element I'd also add is that it is, of course, going to be very important in a net zero world that we do have negative emissions, and using biomethane and CCS will be a clear mechanism to achieve that. We really do appreciate the support that we get from our members for these conferences. So again, thanks to Zoltan and his team, also for the very interesting and useful speech. My time as being the sort of chef d'affaires is now over, I'm afraid. Sorry. You're now going to have to be in the hands of somebody who's much better at it than I am, if I can get my words out today. And this is my 6th annual conference with Eurogas, and all 6 have been moderated by Sasha Twining. And there's a reason for that, because I think you are recognized in Brussels as certainly the best in the business. So Sasha, welcome. Really looking forward to your moderation and the panel's discussions that are coming up this afternoon. Thanks for joining us again this year.
Thank you.
James, thank you for those very kind words. It doesn't mean to say that I'm going to be kind to you or anyone that... Ladies and gentlemen, it's lovely to be with you again today. Now, let me just give you a rough idea of what we're going to talk about and what we have for you, because Eurogas has put together 3 different discussions. We're going to start with an overview in a moment. Then we're going to look at buildings and the challenges with infrastructure, and then we will specifically move on to transport as well. So those 3 different areas. We also have something slightly different for you this year in the addition of an audience panelist, which I know some of the panelists have raised an eyebrow at and wonder how that is going to play out. The idea being this is a place where you can have that open and frank discussion. We already heard about it from Matthew Baldwin a little earlier. An open and frank discussion. We know that there are different opinions, or rather Eurogas knows there are different opinions. Let's hear them this afternoon. So, we're going to start with the gas industry to 2040 and beyond. I'm going to welcome the panelists to stage. Please save your applause to the end in the interests of time. So please come and join me from the cabinet of the Energy Commissioner, Kadri Simpson, Tatiana Marquise-Uriarte. Thank you. We have the CEO of CEFI, Egbert Lag. Zoltan, come and join us again. You're going to be on the first panel with us. And also we have Volberger Emmetsberger, the CEO of Solar Power Europe. Come and join us, and a big hand for our panelists.
Okay.
Thank you.
I like to be between gentlemen.
Thank you. Come and take a seat. Come and take a seat. Actually, do you want to leave that one free for a moment? I'll explain why. You come and sit on this one. It's lovely to have everybody here. So I mentioned that we have an extra panelist. So all stakeholders were allowed to put their name into this hat, as it were, for this discussion. So do we have we do. I can see Kathleen from Eurogas walking towards me with a very fetching, looks like a little bit like a fish tank. Okay. Lovely, thank you very much. Superb. So our extra panelist joining us on stage is, we have from the University of Ghent, post-researcher Simon Van Hove. Simon, would you like to come and join us? Fabulous. Simon, thank you very much. Thank you. Take your seat there on the end. You have a handheld microphone. Why did you want to join this panel?
I'm a researcher working on certification of hydrogen and renewable gas. So, I mean, I'm honored to be here by a stroke of luck, I'd say. And so I'm definitely looking forward to participating in the panel.
Fantastic. Lovely. Thank you very much. I'm really pleased that you put your name in, and no doubt we will have some interesting discussion with the rest of the panel as well. Now, Eurogas has asked each of the panelists to take a few minutes at the start to outline their thoughts on the panel topic. So, the gas industry to 2040 and beyond. Tatiana, would you like to start for us? Give us a few of your thoughts.
Sure, it's very easy because I have already heard very interesting points, so I will build on them to basically say 3 things that I think are important for the gas sector in the coming years. The first thing is that, as you well know, in the climate plan communication, we said that electrification will have a very prominent role in the coming years, specifically until 2040, which is the time frame that we were looking at. Electricity in final energy consumption will double. It will go from 25% to 50%. So it will be very important. This being said, doesn't mean that gas as a career will not continue playing a very important role. And I think that what it has basically changed as compared to some years where we were talking about natural gas as the bridge towards decarbonization and so on, is that now the gas that we want is renewable gas. But it will continue to play a very important role precisely also to to balance electricity whenever, and we will see it happening very soon, that in many member states, renewable electricity will permanently displace fossil fuel electricity, and therefore we will need additional balancing tools in order to have a very stable energy system. Some of it will be done through energy grids, through more storage, through smart grids, through more investments in distribution, transmission level, but a part will still be played by gas. Second thing, this is also because I say that gas will continue to play a very important role, is also because there are some sectors in which it's very difficult to electrify or very difficult to abate CO2 emissions, as you know. And it has already been evoked, some of them, by Commissioner Vălean, for instance, the transport sector. So, I mean, if you look into the impact assessment curve that we have of decarbonization in this climate target plan, you will see that we have been decreasing our emissions quite a lot until now, but as from 2025, the curve goes really steep. And this will basically mean that the real decarbonization starts only now. This is the moment where we have, to some extent, already taken the low-hanging fruits, which is basically the decarbonization of the electricity system. But now we have to look into other sectors that are more difficult to decarbonize, such as transport, such as agri-food sector, and likely all the hard-to-decarbonize industrial sectors. So if I look, for instance, at the agri-food sector, there we have fantastic news for biomethane, because it's basically the win-win solution in terms of providing an additional source to farmers to decrease their energy bill, but also to provide new resources for their activities. The same goes for transport, where we will see, as Commissioner Vălean said, we will see a displacement of certain fossil fuels in transport, oil, kerosene, fuel oil, by other solutions like biomethane, hydrogen derivatives like ammonia, methanol, and so on. And we will also see it in the industrial sectors, not only when gas is used as a feedstock, and therefore, like fertilizer industry and chemical industry, where we will start to, they will start to decarbonize by using hydrogen, but also in some other industrial sectors where basically fossil fuels can be replaced with biomethane or hydrogen as a fuel. So I think that in a way, what we really need to do now is, and I get to my third and last point, is to really give a very big push to the decarbonization of the gas industry. Because that basically will mean that it will be able to tap on these markets that today are basically taken by oil or other fossil fuels, like, for instance, the maritime or the aviation sector. We are trying to do that. We have been doing that in this mandate, together with the member states and with the industry, working very closely. So mainly, I think we have come up now with a stable regulatory framework for renewable gases. And this has, I think, it will provide a lot of stability and predictability to the industry. Now, there remain two things to be done. And we have started, but the mandate is over, and much of it will need to be done by the next Commission. That is working on infrastructure, because the renewable gases will need a particular infrastructure that needs to be adjusted to it, to the different qualities of biomethane and hydrogen, and because the production of these renewable gases will be mostly decentralized. And secondly, we need to continue helping, supporting the hard-to-abate sectors to decarbonize. And we have started to do that with the Hydrogen Bank, with the Innovation Fund, but this is just the beginning. And it will be a big task for the next Commission, I think, to continue in this decarbonization path.
Tatiana, thank you very much. Thank you. So if I can just sort of very quickly sum up, you feel it is a very clear path ahead that you are giving the industry. And I've written down, much a focus on infrastructure. I'm going to make sure that we talk about that because it is, obviously, it is such a crucial area. I saw you taking notes as well, Barbara, especially when it came to certain areas around regulations, and Zoltan was nodding as well. It'd be good to get this conversation started. But Egbert, let's turn to you next. Give us a couple of minutes where you sit and what your thoughts are when it comes to the future to 2040 and beyond.
Yeah, thank you very much. So there's an echo, right?
Try again.
There. So 3 points that I would like to mention, and some of them have already been said by Matthew Baldwin, but the gas is here to stay. And the gas is something that will play a pivotal role for the energy transition. And the first thing that gas is doing, and we should not forget this, the geopolitical crisis has been mentioned as well. Gas today is really fundamental for the security of supply that we have today. Second part, the gas has the optionality to be decarbonized. And in the third part, of course, gas is as well hydrogen in all colors. So basically, there will be a gas industry in the future, way beyond 2040. We heard this as well. There will be parts of the industry that cannot be electrified. So this is where the gas industry will take a role. The second part is on this hydrogen element, where I think we all, as an industry, probably even as a society, did put a lot of hope in how fast and quickly it would evolve. And we are facing now significant difficulties with this. And so therefore, when we are speaking about the hydrogen markets and, let's say, the readiness for it, we should have some realism in this. Hydrogen will start to play a role as of now, but until we have markets, we probably are rather in a time frame which is probably 2035. So what we will see in the hydrogen development and ramp up right now is more a point-to-point delivery, where, let's say, certain volumes of, at least for the green hydrogen, certain volumes are delivered to certain customers, and it's not a market as we know it from the gas and the electricity industry, at least in our view, until the year 2035. And the last thing is coming as well on infrastructure. So what are we as SEFA doing about this? So we are a child of the crisis. So we were born in a way in the structure that we are right now. In 2022, we are under state ownership. So we feel as well very much an obligation, not only to secure energy for Europe, which is in our name, but as well to be a key driver of the energy transformation. And here on the hydrogen side, we will put a lot of focus on infrastructure. Infrastructure, we always have been referring to this as a chicken and egg problem. So if you have the molecules and you can't transport them, it doesn't help. We are an operator and owner of 25% of the German gas infrastructure. We have some pipelines that can be very easily converted, and this is what we are going to do. And we will front run, in a way, this part by starting those investments which are in the billions really as of now, so that the vast of this investment is done in this decade, so that at least the infrastructure is ready and is not serving as an excuse why we cannot enter into this new world. And that is our, let's say, our contribution. And here we are very happy as well that the targets and the framework is ready. The German hydrogen grid has been set out. There is a regulation on it. There is investment certainty. This is where we are active. And in the same way, on our second branch of activities, we are, of course, very carefully investigating those hydrogen production projects for green hydrogen, which are outside, so in the Middle East or South Africa, where the production costs are cheaper than potentially in Europe, so that we can make them ready for the European markets. But that will probably take a while. Will probably not be in 27 or 8, but there's more towards the end of this decade.
So very much from you, that focus on infrastructure, again, that's clearly a topic we need to talk about. And actually, you feel the hydrogen markets will not be fully mature or even as dynamic as you would like until 2035 was the year that you put on that. We'll come back to that point. Zoltan, I'm guessing that you are happy with everything that you said before in your keynote, as much as you don't want to say anything else now, or do you want to?
Add something on
Oh,
the
please do.
infrastructure side.
Okay.
I think looking at the industry 2040, I think additionally to the word decarbonization is diversification, because we're going to see 3 sorts of gases we're going to put into the pipeline. It's going to be methane, which will still be around. It's going to be green hydrogen, and it's CO2. Because if we look at CCS and we look at this potential and the task to move around 100 million tons or even more, we don't want to do it on the road. So CO2 will be a task for the industry. Hydrogen will be a task. Both more like in a backbone infrastructure, perhaps in a parallel lines, one coming from the coast, the other one going to the coast. And then something decentral methane infrastructure with decentral production and very focused applications. So perhaps going out of the households, being more there for the industry, being there more for CHP and so on.
Thank you. Right, Wahlberger, your turn for your thoughts on the general topic of the panel before we hear from our extra panelist and then get into more of a discussion. So where do you see the industry going, 2040 and beyond?
Thanks very much for the invitation. It's not the usual panels I'm speaking at, so thanks very much, James, for inviting me. I mean, I'm coming from the electricity side. I'm representing the solar sector. And what I can contribute to this discussion is that obviously the climate targets for 2030 are clear, the ones for 2040 are also more or less clear. So it is clear that we need to decarbonize big times. And Adina, you already mentioned it, electrification will be at the center of it. And then obviously, depending on which kind of events you're at, electrification is more in the center or gas is more in the center. What I think it shows is that all of that has to come together, and we need to have an integrated planning in order to make sure that we are not building parallel infrastructures, because that's not, the taxpayers' money will not be sufficient for creating parallel infrastructures. So what we're really very much calling for is that everyone's getting together, that we develop an integrated plan for Europe in order to make sure that there is no stranded assets, because we cannot afford it. There's so much money today going into defense, into all the crises that we still need to catch up with, that we have been witnessing over the last couple of years. So we cannot afford to just lose money. So that's one thing. And then maybe the other message I wanted to bring is that electrification is happening, and it's happening much faster than everyone thought still a couple of years ago. Just to give you one example from the sector I am representing, solar, we have been growing 40% year on year over the last couple of years, over the last 3 years in any way. Last year, we installed some 56 gigawatt of solar in Europe. 56 gigawatt of solar. That is, if you want to compare it a little bit, the equivalent of a 15 BCM of Russian gas that we have been replacing with it. So it is enormous amounts of capacities that are getting online. And it is a fact, and it's not just us saying it, but also Fatih Birol, who is leading the International Energy Agency, doesn't stop saying, we've considerably underestimated the pace for years. And he just said it again at the European Council meeting on Monday. We've underestimated the pace, and it is clear that when it comes to electrification and solar in particular, that we will be the leading energy source pretty soon with the growth that we see. So this is what I want to say. I think it is important to come together and to make sure that we're making the right decisions. I do think, and I'm happy to then go into the details. I guess we still have time on hydrogen and how we see hydrogen further evolving. But it's really important to make decisions as well, because technology neutrality, I think, is also something that we cannot afford anymore. So decisions need to be taken, and integrated planning needs to take place.
Okay, so that we don't have the stranded assets, so that consumers are not paying for 3 different types of infrastructure. Yeah, there are nods along the panel to that one. Simon, welcome. Your name came out of the jar. Just give us a couple of minutes on how you see the future of the gas industry.
Sure, thank you. I don't have a clear pitch prepared, but I'm sure I can pick up a few points that were mentioned already. So, as an introduction of myself, I'm a legal scholar and not an attorney as well, focusing on energy law, and I'm really interested because of this background in the impact that regulation has on driving the energy transition forward. And so I think there are 2 issues that we could maybe talk about in this panel. Because we mentioned infrastructure already, I think something that is not coming up often is the future of the distribution grid for gas, as we can assume that the demand will go down on the distribution grid because of domestic heating will be replaced by electrical energy. So what is the future of the distribution grid? What do you do with these assets? How do you deal with this from a regulatory perspective and also from a financial perspective, of course, because you have the risk of ending up with large stranded assets for the grid operators, and also very high costs for the energy users that will be locked in that grid. And most often these are vulnerable households. So that's maybe something we can discuss. And then another concept or term that you hear a lot is the hard to abate sectors, where the use of gaseous energy is foreseen because making a shift to electrical energy would be more complicated or too expensive. And so I think there we need to clarify a bit what we understand by this concept. For sure, in many sectors it will be first a technological challenge to make sure that we have an alternative ready, and then in any case it will also be an economic question, seeing or considering what is the type of or the level of investment that we are willing to take up to really decarbonize these sectors. So I think I'll leave it at that for now.
Okay, no, really good to get your initial thoughts. When you mentioned distribution grids, Egbert nodded in as much as okay, we need to talk about that, we need to have that conversation. What was going through your mind? What are your thoughts there when it comes to that area of infrastructure?
I was afraid that I had to answer that question.
And that's why I went to you.
No, I guess this is one of the big issues that we don't have that clarity. The way I look at this is more from the positive side. The entire transition that we have to go through as an economy for the next 20 to 30 years, there's so many questions, and we cannot tackle all of them at the beginning. We have to take some step by step. Let's say, I think we're now figuring out on the high, let's say, pressure transportation, but then we need to come to that part. What are we doing that? How are we making sure that the last 10,000 customers are still served? And this is a social, let's say, social obligation as well, but of course is putting the distribution grid owners under tremendous financial complication. We don't have an answer to that, but I'm an optimist. We will find it, and maybe this, and that's my pledge then, this should not stop us from starting to act now and engaging in it, because some questions can be answered at a later stage, and we should not wait for everything to be answered on day zero, but take the questions when they come.
Yeah, it is a fine line, though, of waiting to see what happens, but actually needing to make a move and then dealing with what happens down the line. Well, you were nodding to that last point. Your thoughts?
But what I just want to bring to the table is that indeed distribution grids more generally are very often forgotten, also because it's the more complicated part to deal with, obviously. But you know, in electrification, 70% of the renewables will be connected to the distribution grid. So I don't know the situation good enough in gas, but you know, distribution grids are very often forgotten, but are you know, tremendously important. So I think a lot more emphasis needs to be put by the next commission, and maybe already starting now, on the distribution grid side.
Tatiana?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I think a part of the fairness question, equity question, you know, people have obviously the right to have access to energy. There is also the fact that what we expect to be renewable gases in the future, they are going to be locally produced. So that basically means that most of them, they will be injected into the distribution grid and not into the transmission grid. Of course we will, and we talk all the time about these big corridors of hydrogen that will cross the EU to bring hydrogen from the places of production to the places of consumption, but we should not forget that there is also other type of renewable gas, which is biomethane, that will be locally produced and consumed. And for that, you might not need as much distribution grids as you have today, because there will be a lot of electrification of residential buildings and so on, but there is still the need of having an upgrade and investments being done at distribution level to meet the new needs of these type of renewable gases.
Well, Zoltan, that's where you come in. That's your bag. What your thoughts here?
I think because in Germany we're very strongly now in this discussion, what should we do? And I think you have to very much differentiate. Are we talking about a single family home, some of them are on the countryside, which is perhaps today connected to the gas grid, but can easily be, you know, you can do a heat pump, you can do different technologies, or are we, you know, in a dense inner city where the alternative is mainly a heating grid, so district heating, which is also enabling a lot of technologies to be connected, because district heating means you can do solar, you can connect it with heat pumps on a bigger multi-megawatt scale, you can connect it to CHPs, because if we use biomethane, it should be combined heat and power, because this is then backup electricity for the night when there is no sun and so on. So this is the way to think about it. But what we see today, and if I look at Munich and we look at our office, we are connected to the natural gas grid. On the other side of the road, there's district heating. And the neighboring house, which is the same age, 120 years, is still using oil for heating. And this is the problem, that we didn't decide, you know, really on that local level, if we do a heating, district heating pipe, then don't do gas there. If you have gas, then don't do something else there. So this is something where we should really start talking about how to have an integrated planning and how to really put it on ground.
Yeah, I can tell actually a certain amount of frustration almost in your voice when you talk about that. The IEA did their most recent report about the gas industry, saying that they were, in their words, well placed to scale up for crucial net zero technologies using, you know, different gases, using things like CCS, CCUS as well. But they said this would only happen if there was a step change in the allocation of investments. And I wonder, when we look at investments, we move from infrastructure onto investments, so closely linked, obviously, whether you see a step change or whether it's let's just deal with what we have to along the line. Hey, but do you want to start with that?
So you're talking about the, let's say, the molecules itself, so not on the, yeah. So here I think there is a lot of there needs to be more clarity to really put investment down. When I look at Germany, we have these, we heard it, superb success on the, let's say, renewable part. There are some gaps left, in particular in Germany, because Germany was great in deciding what to stop, but not so much, let's say, saying how, let's say, this can completely be substituted. And here the framework is under such a great uncertainty that people hesitate, or capital is hesitating to go there. They rather go in infrastructure than instead of the production itself. And that turns out to be a problem, because this could be then a barrier for the path of the renewable, let's say, the renewable energies. And here I can only, let's say, stress what you said on this integrated planning. I think we have been very much thinking of electricity systems and gas systems kind of separate. And we urgently need to stop that, because I think it is very clear the green transformation will be predominantly driven by green electrons. It will be the green molecules that are supporting where it's hard to abate or where they need to balance out. And so it urgently needs a planning in terms of the regulation, and as well in terms of what, how, let's say, the separate infrastructure plans of the regulators for electricity and gas need to be aligned. So that's very important. And just to make this, let's say, where I think it's not only an avoidance of inefficiencies, I would say it's even probably a waste of resources. For example, if some people would think that we would build up a green, let's say, green hydrogen production in Europe pretty soon, I think this is in contradiction, because it would eat up exactly those, let's say, green facilities that you would need for the electrification. And it is so much better to use the green electron directly before converting it 2 or 3 times. So I guess here as well we should be realistic. So if we speak about green hydrogen, probably for Europe there is a huge import in it, and the green hydrogen we produce is more to support the electricity system than to, let's say, go for the hard to abate sectors. And here I think there's much more coordination needed. But again, it's a learning curve, and I think we should not complain about what's not there, rather as an industry help, let's say, to facilitate those processes.
Yeah, as you were saying that, the whole of the panel was sort of nodding in what I take as agreement. So how do you make it happen? How do you get that better coordination so that there isn't the one or another? Tatiana, yeah, please.
It is more difficult to do than to say, but I just want to recall that you have already provisioned in the decarbonization gas and hydrogen package, where precisely it says, planning has to be integrated between electricity, gaseous/hydrogen. So the provisions are there, and I think that now the regulators, when looking into the 10-year development programs, they will be based themselves on an integrated electricity and gas one. So it's the beginning of it. It's unavoidable that you have a holistic view of the different networks. Otherwise, as Valburga said, it's a waste of money and probably a lot of inefficiencies.
There are lots and lots of different topics that we can talk about within this very wide panel that we have here. But what I'm going to do is actually, I made a note while Matthew was talking about methane emissions, because I think that would be really good actually to get your views on, your thoughts on this panel. And then I'm going to open the floor to questions. We have microphones in the room. Do you think what he was talking about, so more information that importers will have to give on methane emissions by the end of this year, et cetera, everything else that comes along with those regulations, what sort of difference is that going to make to the industry? Simon, do you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, I can try. So basically, it's giving more transparent information to consumers on the emissions that are related to the methane production, or extraction, talking about fossil methane. And yeah, as we know that methane is a very potent greenhouse gas, it's really important to keep track of this. So I mean, it should be applauded that efforts are being made in monitoring these type of emissions. But at the same time, I'm not sure that this additional information will be enough to really provoke a behavioral change in consumers, because still the next best thing would be a lot more expensive, I assume. So there can be some differentiation between different producers if they can, I mean, if this would be sorted with a premium that the consumer is willing to pay to have better, so to speak, fossil gas with lower methane emissions. So yeah, then it could work, but it depends on how the market reacts to this, I think.
Zoltan?
And biogas production also can have emissions, and this is something when we look at the last 20 years, we started off with kind of quality standards.
Do you want to use that one? That's it, lovely. Thank you. We're on the handheld that was under here.
Yes.
Thank you.
We started off with an industry where, well, the focus was produce biogas as cheap as possible. At some point, people realized, oh, we have a methane issue there because they're leaking a little bit of methane. We should solve that. Then they came up with some standards. But the best practice we have now from the industry is to really put a price tag on it. So if it comes to, for example, in the biomethane industry in Germany, you have to have a greenhouse gas value on every kilowatt hour you're producing. And methane is included, so you came up and come with a testimony, because if you can prove that your plant is not losing this standard value of 1% of methane, but you are really good and you have infrared monitoring and stuff like that in place, suddenly you earn more money. And this is really working out. So people are running around with their infrared cameras daily, really looking their share, we know leakage, and they're really pushing it down to 0.01 or something like this. So this level like 1% of the emission which we saw 10 years ago. And this is just by putting a price tag. So if we find ways where we're not just labeling something, but really make people who make the emissions pay for it, I think this could be a good way to go.
Okay, Egbert.
Yeah, I think for our industry, I can give a even more positive outlook, which is when we are on the importing side of LNG, you need a lot of capital. And so it's less the consumers that are going to pay for that, it's more the banking consumers, so basically the financial institutions that look via their ESG requirements, how scope 1, scope 2 emissions are. And this is a key issue for us, where we have targets and where we have as well commitments to, let's say, to reduce, where then we take a look which of the LNG sources we are choosing basically to be our importer, and which ships we run for the LNG transportation, because those are our targets, and those are the foundation that we are having access to cheaper, let's say, to cheaper money. So here I would say there is this on that part. There's already some very good incentives integrated, and the banks are taking it very serious.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else on the panel want to come in on? No? Okay. Let's take some questions from the floor. We have lots of questions. We've got microphones for you. I'm going to take the gentleman just here. He came up with the first one, and then we have another question over there. Anyone to this side that I've... No? Okay. Would you like to introduce yourself first,
thank
please?
you. Thank you. Can Ercan, Energy Counselor from the Permanent Delegation of Turkey to the EU. And I'm also PhD candidate at the University of Groningen, working on energy transition. Yeah. So a remarkable event and very insightful insights, important insights. Even the composition of the panel gives us a hint about the role of gaseous energy post-EU, because there is CEFE and Landwärme and solar power energy. And I would like to ask a question to Mr. Egbert and also Madam Tatiana, because they talk about the competitive production spots in South Africa and also in the Middle East. And Madam Tatiana talk about corridors, hydrogen corridors. So my question is for both of them, what are the main instruments for cooperation for hydrogen connectivity and interconnectivity for the EU Commission? And also, with regards to midstream, we know that there are some huge challenges in the midstream for hydrogen. So what are the main instruments for this midstream challenges for hydrogen? Because we know that Europe will import a considerable amount of hydrogen. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Tatiana, would you? Oh, are you both?
We'll solve that together, right? So on the, it is when we talk about areas where the production is cheaper than in Germany or in Europe in general, then those will be regions in the world where there is more solar and more wind, and basically the combination of both is a perfect set. If these regions are within, let's say, an economic reach where you could then transport the green hydrogen via pipelines, which may be around 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers or something like that, then I guess pipeline would be the, let's say, the choice of, let's say, of transportation. If this is not the case, Middle East, for example, or Namibia, or probably even South Americas, there you would use shipping. And currently the technology here is that you ship are actually ammonia and basically have 2 conversion rounds on top, which is adding up on the pricing and the costing element, of course, significantly, which is making a competitive disadvantage again. But still, it's to be seen whether that can be compensated.
So what I can say indeed is to confirm that we expect indeed to produce big volumes of hydrogen to meet our demand in Europe in the coming years, but it will not be enough to meet that demand. So therefore, we would need to import a certain amount of hydrogen, green hydrogen, from outside the EU. This is why we have been looking, you know, at how to import that hydrogen from an infrastructure point of view. In some cases, pipelines is a possibility. If you think about green hydrogen coming from the north of Africa, where you have a lot of renewable potential, that could be an option if you bring it through the Iberian Peninsula or through Italy. And we have already corridors that have been singled out within our 10E projects of common interest list, where we have one corridor coming through the Iberian Peninsula, another one from Italy, another one from the North Sea with all the wind potential in the North Sea, and potentially also another one coming, you know, from the southeast of Europe. And in the future, if the war in Ukraine finishes, Ukraine has a lot of wind, a lot of solar, it's another possibility to have also a hydrogen corridor from there. So the projects of common interest is basically our main tool to help that these big infrastructures, these big corridors take shape. A part of that, I mean, the fact of being in this list basically means that you will have some advantages. You will have some lower permitting procedures, a political support from the governments involved, a support also from the Commission, of course. You will have a kind of a one-stop shop for all the licensing and so on. And you will have the possibility of bridging your financing case, if you need it, by applying to Connecting Europe Facilities Fund. But of course, I have to warn about this. The fund is limited in funds. So this is one of the areas where we hope that the next Commission and the European leaders in the next term will make a very important upgrade, because with the funds that we have to be very limited in the amount of investments that we can make. And certainly, as it was discussed before, energy infrastructures, being gas, hydrogen, or being electricity, would need to, to see a renaissance, if you want. We are in the Renaissance Hotel, so a renaissance in the coming years, because otherwise, without this infrastructure, you would not be able to do the decarbonization we need.
Thank you. Just very, very quickly, Wolberger, do you have, Ukraine was mentioned as being a big possibility for solar power. Just very briefly, is that an area you're looking at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. So we also have very good cooperation with the industry in the Ukraine. At the moment, unfortunately, when you were mentioning it, that these are all plans, when the war is over. At the moment, our priority is to help the Ukrainian people with deploying solar on hospitals, on schools, in order to have the electricity that they need. So we have a project where we are supporting the Ukraine with bringing solar and helping them at this point in time. But indeed, there's a huge potential. And just recently, also the renewable goals for the Ukraine have been discussed. So the potential is there. We will tap into it. The moment when the war is over.
Sooner rather than later, hopefully. Absolutely. Thank you. We have a question down here, and then lady on the end there. We'll come to you next. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the excellent discussion. I have a small impression, a slight impression that we are discussing the European transition somehow being insulated from the world. However, Europe is dependent on external markets and even on demand in Asian emerging economies. So I have a question to all of you, just to reflect, to think, or to vote, whether you would like to see over the next 2 decades, or 1 decade and a half, gas prices to be elevated, so it stimulates the energy transition, electrification, biogas, or you would like them to be low in order to mitigate the social costs of the energy transition. Thank you very much.
Thank you. There's some smiles on the panel here. Let's just run along the line with a higher or lower.
Well, it's always tricky to count on a market to achieve your policy objectives, right? I think we see the same in the ETS market. Everybody is sad when the prices are low, but of course industry is quite happy then. But that's not how you achieve the policy objective. So for me, as an outsider, I don't really have an opinion. I mean, I guess to drive forward the transition, this would go quicker if the prices were higher, because then investments opportunities are better.
Yeah, I think the art is to find the sweet spot of the price level that accelerates the transition rate and as well allows the transformation of the industry at the same time, because if that is too fast, we are not gaining anything. What is that price level? That's the $1,000 question. It is for sure more than 20 euros per megawatt hour that we have. And I guess it is clearly less than 250 or 300 that we have seen. This is not very smart. I agree.
Big gap there.
I'm a state employee, so I have to be very careful what I say. No, but I guess there is, let's say, there is this part, and maybe the carbon price, actually the CO2 price might be a good indicator. And there we have seen, once you surpass 180, 200, things get going. And probably that might be something like a sweet spot that is still accepted. I say something around, let's say something around that level.
Okay, let's just have just very quick answer. Did you want to come in, Tatiana?
Yeah, no problem. I don't work for the industry, so I can say what I think. And what I think I would like to have as a price for gas and for any energy career, by the way, is a price that really reflects the decarbonization, the cost of carbon, basically. So I would like that renewable gases are competitively much more interesting to buy than natural gas, and therefore that we could help to decarbonize our sectors.
Zoltan?
I think the key is the CO2 price.
I think you're on the handheld still.
Yeah. Let's see if it works now.
There we go. Okay. So nice and close.
I think the key is the CO2 price, because then if we have a high CO2 price, we get this additional income from CCS. So we can offer biomethane cheaper, and then we get grid parity with natural gas. So if you add the 200 euros per ton of CO2 on natural gas, we have this income in producing biomethane, we will match. At the end, the consumer still has to pay 40 to 50 euros for something where he pays either a CO2 price or gets something which is green, but this could be a way to go.
I'm really looking forward to your answer.
So, what we have seen is that high gas prices have not only, had an effect on the gas market, but also on the electricity market. So as long as gas and electricity markets are coupled, and we do think, the merit order is still the best system that we have, obviously it has an impact also on the electricity market. Now, I think what is important is that we are comparing apples with apples and not apples with pears. And what we see is that there is still very, very high subsidies given to gas, for example, or to fossils more generally. So we're not competing on a level playing field when it comes, for example, in the heating sector. So I think this is something that we need to fix. And other than that, maybe last remark is that whatever the price will be, we will be not determining it because it will be largely also depending on geopolitical developments. So we don't know, and this is why it's all the more important in terms of also the security of supply to develop homegrown energy as much as possible.
Lovely, thank you. Let's just have a very quick final question. There. Lovely, thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Eva Hennig, and I'm the chair of the distribution committee within Eurogas, and this is why I have a question, but I would also like to comment on the discussion on the distribution system operators, and I would support what Tatiana said. Most of the renewable gas plants will be connected to the distribution grid, but we are not talking about biomethane, we're talking about biomethane and hydrogen. And what most people don't know is that most of the DSOs could inject today already 100% of hydrogen. So most of the DSO pipes are hydrogen ready, which means that we are much further advanced than is commonly known. And the second point is that in some countries, 99% of the industrial users are connected to the distribution grid, which means that the decarbonization of the industry will go through the decarbonization of the gas grid. So that's as a comment as a DSO. But I have a question for Zoltan. So we have the 35 BCM in biomethane, but we don't have country targets. So the question is, how do you see the future evolving? So each country shall come up with a plan on the biomethane, but do you think that can you see that this is really happening within the countries, not only in Germany, but also other countries?
Eva, thank you. Obviously, the countries are at so many different places on their biomethane journey. If I can ask you to keep this answer quite short, if I may, and you of course, can talk more later. Yeah.
No, I think I pointed out this in my speech earlier, but we are not there. I think that we are currently at the stage that 10 countries really thought about it and came up with targets, and 7 didn't. So there is a way to go.
A way to go. Ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time. We will leave it there, but I think you'll join with me in thanking our panelists for a really interesting discussion. Thank you. Thank you very much. Please feel free to go and take your seats in the audience. Ladies and gentlemen, just before you break for coffee, I would just like, thank you, Zoltan, thank you. Just like to do a very quick poll with you. If you could take out your phones for me. And we will show you a QR code. This is just to give you something to think about over coffee. So I'm going to show you a QR code on the screen. If you wouldn't mind getting out your phones and taking a picture of the QR code. Hopefully that's working for everyone. It's going to take you through to a polling app called menti.com. If you're having any problems, you can see the code there, but that should take you straight through if you use the QR code. Great, let's move on to the question that it's going to ask you. So, after what you've just heard, if we can move on to the question, if we can, on the slide. Brilliant, thank you. We're looking at the legislative framework. Is the EU legislative framework adequate for realising the full decarbonisation potential of the EU gas value chain? Goodness me, we're asking you to come up with a real Yeah, really putting your, it's like a pin the tail on the donkey type moment, isn't it? It's like, right, where am I going to go? So, fully adequate. Yes, it's suitable. It will support the scale up of all decarbonisation technologies. It's partially adequate. It provides a solid foundation. Maybe more needs to be done to address the challenges. Maybe you just think inadequate, too tight, too rigid, technology specific, doesn't work, or you're not sure. Okay, so fully adequate, partially adequate, inadequate, or you are uncertain. Should we see the results? Ooh, pink. Partially adequate. Okay, if you said fully adequate, I would love to know where you... I was going to say, Tatiana, were you just jabbing at your phone there? So whoever said fully adequate needs to go and talk to that big red portion of the cake there. But actually, partially adequate, the figure, in case you can't see, is actually 59%. Ladies and gentlemen, it's something to talk about over coffee. Go and grab yourselves a cup. I'm going to shorten the break slightly. We've got two really interesting panels coming up, talking about buildings and transport. If you could come back in the room in 10 minutes, please. Thank you so much. Thank you. Or rather, our second discussion area of the afternoon. Thank you. If you would just come in now, thank you, and come and take a seat. There's a couple of seats over here if you want to make your way over. Fabulous. Thank you. Couple more coming in. Lovely. Thank you very much. Superb. Right. So we are going to concentrate now on the transition in buildings. However that is, in whatever sort of way and whatever is needed. Buildings, as you know, are the single largest energy consumer in Europe. What's going to happen there? And possibly, more importantly, who's going to pay for it? Where is the money going to come from? Is it going to come from the public or private sector? And how much is going to be needed? And how is it going to be spent? So we're going to get our panel of experts on stage in a moment. But what we thought we would do is take a good overview of this area and this particular part of the sector, decarbonising cities. And we're going to get the point of view now of an integrated operator. How can the whole supply chain work together in this area? So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Director of Smart Infrastructures at the business unit of A2A, Francesco Bresti.
Thanks, everybody, for being here. Okay, so I will quickly describe what we are doing. Well, first of all, A2A is an integrated company present in all sectors of the energy transition and the circular economy. We work in energy generation, distribution, waste treatment, and many other areas. My specific responsibility is in the business unit that takes care of all the network business, so electrical network, gas network, district heating, water, plus mobile recharging and a couple of other things. So our peculiarity basically is that in some areas we manage all the energy vector but the gasoline. So we are both participating and really making it happen in terms of energy transition. And I will make the case of Milan. Milan is our home field. It's a very dense city, an incredibly dense city. The density in terms of energy is bigger than London or Manhattan. It's rich. In Italy, it's probably the richest area of the country. Very future-oriented. I mean, some things are happening in Milan that are not yet happening in other areas of the country. And for example, gas distribution points are coming down. Basically, all new buildings are not requiring gas. They are either going all electric or electric plus district heating. And, electric mobility is by far more advanced than in other areas. So in some ways, we can expect Milan to be kind of a highlight of what is going to happen country level. It's very polluted. It recently made the headlines because, according to some news, it was the third most polluted city in the world. Highly disputed, but either it's the third or the fourth doesn't make a lot of difference, really. It's a place where you need to act. And we're working in a stable regulatory context, and that's very important for someone investing in infrastructure like us. So basically, this all makes up for a situation that is highly stressed. It's difficult to work in such a dense environment. There are high expectations from the municipality and the people living in the city. We need to act quickly, and it's obviously an investment opportunity as long as it's a stable environment. So this is a situation, basically today. These are the vectors that are coming into the city. So 40% is gas, more than 40%, and of that 40%, 80% is basically part of the heating mix. So heating in Milan is by far based on gas. 30% is electricity, that contributes only to 3% of the heating mix. Fuels, mostly driven by mobility, and partly also heating. We still have oil buildings, especially downtown Milan, the center, the old city center. And district heating is currently covers something like 12% of the heating mix and provides 6% of the total. So we basically have put together all the municipal plans, all the legislation in Italy, all the targets that we have, and we try to come up with what is the end scenario in many years from now. And what we come up with is a 2050 scenario, in which the first thing is the total energy is going down significantly. This is both due to the electrification of the mobility, that is way more efficient going electric than going gasoline, and plus expected increase in efficiency in buildings. The mix changes significantly. As you see, electricity will take the biggest portion of that. It's 55% of the total mix. 23% is we expect from district heating, that will cover about a third of the heating necessity in the city. But still, less than 20% will come from molecules. Molecules will cover mostly, will be related to heating, something to appliances, like my wife will never leave her gas stove at home, and still some mobility. And I mean, this is our scenario. And we understand it's not perfectly compliant with all the targets that we have at the EU level of a perfect carbon neutrality. But yeah, first of all, we still have to understand what these molecules are going to be. And we can discuss it quickly later. But still, the specific area of a density with pretty old buildings makes it very difficult to imagine to install heat pumps everywhere and get district heating reaching all the parts of the city. So in order to build this, I love this picture. It came out in a paper a few years ago, and I use it every time I can. It's a group of people discussing how to save Earth from climate change, and they're all discussing EVs and solar panels and that stuff, and the big elephant of heating sitting in the middle of the room, and everybody trying not to pay attention to it. But that's really the big question. I mean, how to heat these dense and old buildings is the very big question that we all have. We did some numbers for the municipality of Milan a few years ago on the cost of removing carbon from heating in Milan. And the target was, as you can see, more than 1,000 kilotons of carbon per year. And that was our estimate of cost. And so it was 12 billion euro by working on the envelopes, let's say, on the building itself, like windows and the floor and all that stuff. 4 for heat pumps, and 1.6 for efficient district heating, where for efficient we mean 75% coming from waste heat. So that's a huge difference. And these numbers were made before our infamous super bonus law that basically duplicated the cost of working on buildings. So the first column as of today is probably closer to 20, right? Heat pumps obviously cost more, but I mean, probably the difference is even more surprising and staggering. So we either print a lot of money, or we will have to find a decent and efficient way. And I certainly reflect some of the considerations made by the previous discussion regarding the necessity for a plan in a city. You cannot let all the vectors go by themselves and then find yourself in a situation with a lot of distressed assets. As of today, it is more. You have a better return investing in gas distribution than in electricity distribution in Italy. So pure gas players are investing like crazy because it makes sense for them. But we can ask 30 years from now what's going to happen with that. So the challenge is District heating, where to find waste heat resources. Obviously, the typical idea was a big waste treatment plant, and we have them, and we're very proud of them. The big hope as of today is data centers. They're coming up like crazy. Just around Milan, there are requests from the electrical network for 4 gigawatt of connection just for data centers. And these guys spend 30 to 50% of the energy just cooling the machines. So a lot of heat is coming out of these buildings. And if we can catch it and put it in our pipes, we can basically double the impact of district heating in Milan just from waste heat. The second one is molecules. What would they be? Our situation today is we are very open to see what is going to happen, but clearly, biomethane is certainly an opportunity, but the numbers don't add up. As of today, biomethane accounts for some like 200 million tons in Italy, and we are looking at a total demand from gas for 36 billion. So it's just way too much to expect biomethane to solve it by itself. And hydrogen, extremely expensive. We have an MOU with Middle Eastern countries who seems to provide this at a cheaper price, but still not competitive. So these molecules, we still have to understand what they're going to be. And finally, electricity, will heat pumps deliver? I mean, I have a heat pump in my house, but I live in Rome, and I basically destroyed the house and made floor heating everywhere. Water goes at 40 degrees. It works just fine. But if you are in Milan and you're in an old building and you cannot basically scrap your current infrastructure, we have it in some buildings and people is not happy. And we have big buildings coming to us asking for district heating connection because they're not happy with heat pumps. So as of today, imagining a city in the north of Italy just working on heat pumps is very future-oriented, let's say. I was reading yesterday on the New York Times that New York is pushing air heat pumps all around the city. To me, it doesn't really make sense, neither from a cost perspective, neither performance. So big questions are still coming up, and hoping to find some answers in this panel. Thank you very much.
Francesco, thank you. You want to come take a seat? Lovely, thank you very much, thank you. Really, really interesting. It's so good to get a great case study such as Milan, because I know that we'll talk more about that and how things can change. It'd be great to hear your views on that one. Let me now bring the rest of our panelists to stage, and in the interest of time, if you could save your applause for the end. Head of Unit for Buildings and Products at the European Commission, delighted we have Stefan Moser with us. We also have Senior Policy Advisor of the BPIE, the Centre of Expertise for Buildings, Ellen Sibylou. Ellen, thank you very much for joining us. And from the European Heating Industry, the Secretary-General, Federica Sabatti. Federica, thank you so much. Thank you very much. And as we did in our first panel, you will see there is an empty seat at the end. So if I could have the jar, is it the same jar? Fabulous. Okay, so if you are just joining us for this panel, Eurogas asked all stakeholders if they wanted to be on this panel as well, they could put their name into the jar. Expertly shaken there, Kathleen. Lovely, thank you very much. I've just got one. Superb, thank you. We have from Liquid Gas Europe, the Senior Policy Officer, Leonard Vosna, I believe. Leonard? Leonard? Lovely, thank you. Thank you so much, and my apologies, I'm sure, for getting the pronunciation of your second name totally incorrect.
Oh no, close enough.
That's not bad. Why did you want to be on this panel? Just a couple of words.
Yeah, so we at Liquid Gas Europe, we tend to like to say that we are also representing the voices of rural areas. And therefore, seeing that we already have somebody representing cities, I think we'll have a good balanced approach of seeing perspective from cities and rural regions as well.
Perfect, perfect. I have a feeling next time Eurogas does this, there's going to be an awful lot more names of people going, right, yes, let me get my views heard on this one. So what we have done is we've asked all our panelists to come up with a few minutes to sort of explain where they sit within this industry. But I thought before we did that, I just want to ask you, when it comes to transition in buildings, what is the most critical thing as far as you are concerned? I'm going to give you 3 different choices here. If we look at affordability first, so affordability of the clean heat technologies and the renewable energy. So affordability, efficiency, so energy efficiency of the buildings and also demand reduction, or system flexibility and security of supply. So 3 different things. What is your priority or the most important thing when it comes to the transition in buildings? I'll be looking for your hands as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you think it is the affordability of the technologies, raise your hand. Okay, a smattering, including James, it has to be said. Okay, no one on the panel. The efficiency of buildings. Okay, okay, so a few more there. And system flexibility and security of supply. Actually, to me, I don't know whether you...
And we need to participate in that one as well.
No, well
thinking too much.
No, I'm going to ask you. Federica, you are going to get your... I think it was the efficiency, the energy efficiency, to most people was the priority. Federica, let me just quickly go along the panel, but would you agree with that one?
I mean, that's really linked to the first one. Huh? The more you are efficient, the less you're going to spend on your bills. So that make it a, smart, I think, answer for, so, let's say, nice words to those that voted efficiency. But I think the two are linked, no?
Yeah, Francesco, you put your hand up for the third one, I think.
I think security, I mean, people will pay whatever to have energy, I guess. So even if, it's certainly better to have it affordable or thing, but without energy, we are destroying way too many things.
Ellen, where would you have gone? Which one would be most important for you?
I chose the energy efficiency and energy demand reduction because I think with this one you are solving a lot of other issues, including providing cheaper energy bills for consumers, shielding everyone in Europe from energy security issues, and also helping us to decarbonizing and achieve our climate targets. So I think it's actually the silver bullet for a lot of our issues.
Stefan, please don't say all of them.
But I do. I didn't raise my hand because we need to make the sums, basically. It needs to be affordable, secure, and sustainable, and that's the golden triangle, basically.
Which one's at the top?
It's an optimization. It cannot be one of the 3. It's an optimization. It's balancing the 3. That's what we are trying to do. So.
Okay.
Well, at the risk of also agreeing that it's kind of all 3, we always say that we want to be accessible, available, and affordable. So I'd have to argue with probably 1 and 3 being up there amongst the more important, but I guess it also depends on who you're asking, as we've seen. So, yeah.
So 1 and 3, once 2 is sorted, or 2 has to be sorted at the same time?
Well, I guess it depends, right?
It depends. That's almost a politician's answer, I feel there. So let's take a few minutes now to hear from our panelists. And Stefan, I will come to you first. So give us a couple of minutes to outline your thoughts on this topic, the transition here of buildings.
No, thanks a lot. I mean, what we're trying to do is a systemic approach, really. So across all energy sectors, but also beyond energy, social policy, mobility. We need to optimize the energy system across grids, smartness, demand response, demand flexibility, but of course, integration of renewables and energy demand, energy efficiency with the, I would say, the societal mission, which we all have, is to fight climate change, but at the same time, of course, ensure that we make energy affordable and also secure, because any energy system which is not secure is no good. Affordable means for vulnerable citizens more broadly, and industry, competitiveness, basically. And we think that we can make it work with the different proposals and now legislation from Fit for 55, the Green Deal, previously Energy Union, to have that integrated thinking and see really what is the right approach for individual aspects of the building sector, but also the linkages to the grids, to mobility, to urban planning, to social policy. That needs to be done together. Otherwise, there will not be acceptance. It needs to work for everyone, really.
And a different mix, different examples, obviously, in different places, but with a local awareness of the best solution for them.
In principle, it requires evidence-based decision-making. So an analysis, what works in a particular context, what are the options, what is available, and what actually is the best approach. In a city like Milan, for instance, but in rural areas, in areas which have direct access to geothermal, where there's a lot of waste heat, for instance, which can be used, where there's access to renewable energy, such as wind and solar, and where there are difficulties in that respect. How do we solve it there? So we will not be able to have the same approach for everyone. There needs to be an inventory of where are the weaknesses and the strengths, what needs to be sorted out with buildings, how do we go about them gradually in a feasible manner, because we cannot do more than is possible at a given moment. It would overburden society, and we need to create continuity, predictability, and that is what we plan or hope to be achieved through the national energy and climate plans and the sectoral plans, the building renovation plans, for instance, but also then the link to grid planning, mobility planning, urban planning more broadly, together with the citizens and, of course, other stakeholders.
Yeah, I've just made a note of your phrase, mustn't overburden society. We will talk a lot about finance, who pays, and where the money comes from and where it goes to. Stefan, thank you very much. Francesco, do you want to add any further thoughts, or are you... No, okay. Let me go to Elek next. So your thoughts, your overview of where you stand, your position on the transition of buildings.
Thank you, and thanks to Eurogas for the invitation. It's also, for me, maybe the unusual conferences I would attend and speak to, so I'm glad to be here. Talking about the transition in buildings, and maybe to present ourselves, BPIE is the Buildings Performance Institute Europe, and we are the leading independent think tank working on energy performance of buildings, and we do research, advice, and analysis mostly on the energy performance of buildings directive. Now on the question, the transition in buildings, and the title of the session was What is Possible? And I really like to always start by taking a step back and recall what is actually desirable. And we talked a bit in the last session about the targets. We have 2030 targets, 2050 vision. For the building stock, it's a zero emission building stock. We are starting to discuss the 2040 target. We know reduction of energy consumption is very important. Buildings are going to contribute a lot to this, and we need to continue delivering and achieving higher ambition. What guides us should be the energy efficiency first principle, reducing the energy demand and then opening up possibilities for the supply side. Then the next step is, when we know where we want to go, we have to also be aware of what is already required. As Stefan was just mentioning, we have now an adopted energy performance of buildings directive. At EU level, it needs to be published, but the real work at national level will start on transposition, and this is really important and will drive the transition in buildings at national level. We are having in this new directive a new standard for new buildings, the zero emission building standard. We have renovation requirements for the existing stock, both non-residential and residential, with mandatory requirements. And we also have a very strong enabling framework that member states have to put in place. One-stop shops to help consumers and citizens, renovation passport, and a lot of good things for the financial support as well. So that brings me to the last part and the what is possible question. I would say a lot of good things are actually possible, but we need to get it right. We need to get things done. By we, I mean, of course, all stakeholders, people that are working in the energy and building sector. But I would probably have two actors in mind mostly. The first one, as I was saying, member states need to start their work on transposition. And they can do a lot of good things if they take all the opportunities that are in the Buildings Directive. I like to actually describe it as a treasure chest, and maybe Stefan would be happy about that metaphor. It's a treasure chest of opportunities to decarbonize the building sector. Now it's in the hands of member states to do it. And the second actor I would like to mention is the industry. And a lot of good action can be taken by industry. For example, helping to reskill the workers, to train, to get ready on the ground. And the other part is to ramp up the production of all the energy saving and renewables heating technologies, because we have the technologies in the building sector to decarbonize. We don't need to reinvent a lot of things. We just need to produce them, get them on the ground, and get them to consumers.
Thank you. Reskilling workers, do you feel the industry then could do more?
Absolutely. There are initiatives that already exist. At the EU level, for example, we have built up skills, we have some financing programs that bring money to member states to reskill workers, train them for being ready to the new requirements, for new technologies, to also digitalize the sector, get things done faster, in a less dirty way. But of course, if that can be upscaled at a much bigger size, that would really help.
A quick question to the room. Who believes the industry, where you are within the industry, could do more to reskill or upskill workers for this particular part of the transition? There's one gentleman here who's just put his hand straight up. This is obviously an area that you feel very passionate about. Thank you. Federico, if I may now come to you. Yep. Give us a couple of minutes on your thoughts of where your organisation sits within this.
Yeah. So first, I'm so glad that I heard a couple of things that I've been talking about for a long time, and now coming both from EPA and from the European Commission. The first one on the solution. Buildings are a very difficult sector to decarbonize, because they're very different across Europe, because they lie in different climatic regions, because consumers don't have the same economic possibilities everywhere, because there are different energy infrastructures everywhere. So the one solution, and here in Brussels, we use this word a lot, the famous silver bullet does not exist. And this is also why it's very difficult, or maybe this is major reason why it has been so difficult even to get a strategy for the whole Europe on heating. And we, as manufacturers of heating systems, a variety of heating systems, are doing exactly that, are trying to make those technologies ready for all of the environments in order to answer to the consumer needs that are mainly of having a warm home and taking a shower in the morning. So where we therefore have an awareness of these technologies that is coming to consumers just at the moment where their heating systems breaks down. Typically, in the last couple of years, there's been a bit different. Awareness has grown because of issues that we know very well. First of all, the pandemic really put the heating and the health, the well-being within buildings very high up on the agenda. And afterwards, in 2020, from 2022, of course, the Russian invasion of Ukraine and therefore the energy crisis that we have been facing, and then consumers have been facing. Those two things have really, shaped also the awareness and the development in the market. So that's the first thing. On the skills, I will get in a second. The second thing that Ellen mentioned, where I very much agree, and I've been talking about this for a long time, is technologies are indeed ready. We don't have a gap, a technological gap where we're like, what are we going to use now for heating these homes? No, we do have. The problem is coming afterwards, and that's the deployment. And here, I would really like to ask how many people in this room are having a heat pump running in their home?
Okay, raise your hands if you have a heat pump. Okay, I mean...
That's not a super lot. It's not a super lot.
Gas boiler? Yeah, there we go. Okay. District heating? Okay.
I think this is more or less the picture. This is more or less the pictures that we have in Europe. You know, largely heating is individual heating. It's not district heating. It is about 10%. It changes from country to city. The people are mainly using individual heating, largely based on gas, on fossil fuels, and largely. And this probably you don't know, those of you who have the gas boiler, how old and efficient that gas boiler is. And so one of really the continuous problems that we are facing is really the market deployment. Why are people not changing their heating systems to more efficient ones, to renewable-based ones? And it doesn't have to be so much linked to the legislation that we have adopted, because we've adopted a hell of a lot of stuff this year. And yesterday we just presented our heating market report here. This one, which you can, I only have one copy here, but you can find on our website, that gives some numbers, because we, of course, as industry, have got the mission to deliver those technologies that are making us compliant to 2050 climate neutrality. So we need to assess, measure how good we are doing, not just we as industry, but the whole society, including the policymakers on this. And the reality of the fact is that although there's a lot of legislation in place and a lot of support, particularly for heat pumps, these are not really taken up so much. Exception, the year 2021, 2022 was very good, probably because of the awareness created by these two elements that I mentioned earlier. In 2021, we sold for the first time 1 million heat pumps, so we're very happy about that, and we had almost 1.4 million heat pumps in 2022. When we're looking at 2023 and the first data of this year, we are looking at a much slower market where, even in 2024, we're looking at, minus 40% in the first months on heat pumps. This is not where we want to go. This is not where we need to go. So the acceleration that we need to install heating technologies that are, future ready depends on a number of reasons that are linked to, market deployment, and I'll just mention them, then I'll be quiet. Energy prices, this was mentioned a little bit also before. The operating costs of particular heat pumps need to make sense for the consumer. So once you invest in a technology that is very expensive and very efficient, you need to see it in your bill. This is in lots of parts of Europe not possible at the moment. So that needs to be worked out. Public incentives. Heat pumps are at the moment selling well where there are incentives, particularly where they are stable. As soon as the incentives are stopped, like it has happened in several countries in Europe, then the market effect is over. This issue of the skills, so that's where I'm coming. We are the ones training installers. There's 1.5 million installers around Europe, and half of them needs to be reskilled for typically heat pumps, but other technologies. We are doing that. Public authorities are not doing that. So certainly there's a lot to do, but that goes even a bit earlier. That goes, we changed the curricula at school, because at the moment, if you choose to be an electrician, you don't know how to do, water-based systems and vice versa. So that is just one of the ideas. But that needs to be done. But in order to reach the numbers that we are targeting, we really need to have a larger and upskilled, let's say, army of, maybe that's not a good word in these times, but yeah, element of people that are up to that level to install much faster these technologies.
How just very brief facts, just because I'm pretty sure it'll be quite interesting. 1.5 million, did you say?
Yeah.
Okay, how long does it take to train someone, reskill?
This is difficult to say, because it depends from, there's a certification, every country has different certifications, so that depends on that. So it really varies from some months to a couple of years, depends really from the member state. Okay. But what we know is that, for example, in order to install a heat pump, it takes, at the moment, let's say double or 2.5 times as long for an installer to install a heat pump than a boiler. And this is why, as industry, we're also working to make them much easier to install, but at the same time, that's why we need more numbers, more people that do that.
You can't crunch the numbers any other way, can you? That's what it comes down to. Leonard, do you want to give us just a couple of minutes on your position in this, and then we're going to open the floor to questions, get into the chat on this area.
Yeah, so we as Liquid Gas Europe, we're representing the liquid gas sector. That means the distributors and producers of liquid gas and renewable liquid gases, LPG, propane, butane, as well as more DME as well. We tend to focus when it comes to heating on rural and off-grid areas. Therefore, we're kind of a black sheep within this community, seeing that we really are going more in the direction of looking at what's available in rural areas and how the energy transition can really work and keep them on board as well. So when we're talking about rural areas, what's important to note there is we're talking about roughly 150 million citizens, 50 million households, and we've also heard about vulnerable people, energy poverty. This is an area where we see quite a bit of this risk of energy poverty as well as vulnerability. So liquid gases and renewable liquid gases in particular are, in our view, a particularly key way of ensuring that we have a just transition that keeps all people on board. As I said, available, accessible, and affordable. Affordability is important here, mainly because we have this benefit, just like with all other renewable molecules out there, is that we're a drop-in solution to existing technologies. So with existing technologies now, we can very easily move over to renewable liquid gases. We can provide at least some sort of decarbonization potential and keep this key point of affordability in areas where it's more vulnerable and more at risk to energy poverty. Therefore, when we're looking at this from our perspective, there's obviously always a need to keep in mind that we're going hand in hand with other technologies as well. We're not necessarily saying by any means that, again, there is a silver bullet for rural areas, because it's not. There's, just like we don't have a silver bullet for more urban areas or those that are connected to the gas grid or can afford to move for a full deep renovation that constitutes as well installing a heat pump. But we also see how renewable liquid gases and technologies running on them can play hand in hand with other forms of electrification, whether it's through solar heating as well or in conjunction with a hybrid heat pump. So there's always obviously that potential there. Yeah, I think keeping it short, that's more or less where we stand.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's going to be good to have you on the panel because, as you say, you're looking at the rural areas in contrast to what we hear from Milan. Actually, before I open the floor to questions, I did promise that we would look at finance and who is going to pay for this. So, where's the money come from when we are particularly concerned about energy poverty, which leads to all other types of societal poverty, and the importance there when we are looking at household budgets, then business budgets, consumer budgets as a wider area. Who should be paying? Where's the money going to come from? Where should the money come from? Maybe more incentives. Federica, I'm looking at you because you're raising your eyebrows in that sort of a,
No, I mean, so we are all responsible for the energy transition. It's not like there's one guy here who's the responsible, the others are listening there. So I think as industry, what we can say is that industry has, and certainly our industry has a certain responsibility, and we have invested in the last 4 years, the 4 years only, something like several billions in new production capacities for new technologies. So that's footing our, we're footing up the bill for making sure that we have the technologies and that they are ready to be deployed. This is why we don't have a technology gap here, at least for the heating sector. obviously now we have a problem because all the heat pumps that we are producing, that we've produced, are now laying in our warehouses, or the one of our clients, let's say, and our clients are not the final customer, and nobody's buying them for a number of reasons that I've said before. So then that's the second part: who's footing that bill? Yeah, of the transition, and that, I think, has to come a little bit from everybody. I mean, we also have ourselves a responsibility for that. If we want the energy transition, we need to also change our own behaviors.
Elek.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to jump in on the financing question, and it's quite striking. I find that often in panels when we discuss the energy transition in buildings, this is a question that often comes up, and I find it comes less in other parts of the economy. So I find it quite striking. To respond on the question of who is responsible, I think there are some sort of quality principle that need to be followed when we are talking about financing building renovation and decarbonization. The first thing is there should be an optimal use of public money. We still see some financing programs that basically pay 100% of, a very targeted renovation program. That is maybe not the best use of public money. So at BPIE, what we always say is that the public money should be there as a leverage and should fund what we call the renovation ecosystem. So basically putting everything around consumers and citizens to help making the choices. So put there a network of one-stop shop to help them, to guide them in the renovation journey. Fund renovation passports, fund renovation advisors. And then consumers who have the means can either pay from their pockets, partly, or they can go to banks. And the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive also introduces this idea of a mortgage portfolio standards, where banks would be brought in the renovation system and would more easily fund with mortgages renovation projects. Now, for another part of the population, those who are vulnerable, suffering from energy poverty, of course, here public money should be, of course, helping a greater deal. And a last, also common sense, but actually not always applied principle is higher impact, higher support. The deeper you renovate, the more you get money. The more when you go to renewable heating technology, the more money you get. That is a simple principle, not yet fully applied in all member states or in all renovation projects.
Francesco, do you want to give us the example of Milan, or look wider than that? Who pays? Where is the money coming from?
Well, first of all, I don't like the public money word, because there's no public money, it's just taxpayers' money, right? So either people who pay taxes pay, and the people who pay taxes in Italy is a very small portion of the population, so you either make them pay for everyone. Thank you, everyone.
You can have a chat later.
So you either make them pay for everyone, or you make the consumer and the one who should get the benefit of the reduced bill and the better infrastructure that is using pay, right? And the second consideration is in whoever pays, there has to be a decent business case. I mean, when I hear about green hydrogen and you imagine to install renewables, then lose 70% of their production because the electrolyzer works exactly like that, and you lose 70%. And you get 30% of that energy, and then you have to compress it and move it everywhere and send. I mean, there's really no business case. There's no economic sense in that, right? So you either do it because you're going to burn because of climate change and you die and then you pay for everything, or you have to find a better alternative.
Stefan?
It's indeed about creating investment cases. Renovations are investments in buildings. They are reflected in increased value of the building itself, but also of the use of the building, and generate also lots of co-benefits. And there are situations where indeed there's a public good character, and where vulnerable people will not be able to compensate through increased rents, for instance, for the increased overall value of the renovation. there, basically, society needs to help. Otherwise, people would have to move out, because that is not acceptable. But there are co-benefits, because vulnerable people who benefit from renovation, they will be better included. They get better life chances, better health, better safety, and that is a benefit also for society, so can justify public money to be invested. In many cases, it's a liquidity challenge, so we estimate that 85% of the volumes need to come from the private sector. There will be a payback over a reasonable period. Investment cases need to be created by further fine-tuning also the fiscal system. For instance, when we look at the gas-electricity price relationship, taxation, various issues to be looked at. But 15% will more or less have to come from public sources to, as Elaine said, create and build up the ecosystem, but also finance public goods and, for social policy reasons, vulnerable people. So, and that needs to be targeted as possible, as predictable as possible. No stop and go. For that, we have the building renovation plans, and need to make sure that also the budgetary planning in each member state complies with that and does not jump from one year to the next. Suddenly a lot of money, inflation, prices soaring, then money is gone, down, all unemployed or no business anymore. So this is exactly what is to be avoided. And we hope that with this framework which we have now, but also the responsibility for member states to steer the process through national plans, which are much more operational and much more, I would say, an inclusive, generally consulted reference framework for citizens, but also the renovation sector, the building sector, planning authorities, cities, everybody involved to stick to that and then generate also the volumes needed. There are also opportunities, financial, economic opportunities for banks. It's not charity. So I think we need to get away from the idea that this is all charity for climate, for saving the world. It is not. It is climate policy, but it's also other policies. It's social policy. It is investing in society, in our competitiveness, our resilience, in our energy security, and in simply making our buildings a better place to live and use. So.
And I come back actually to Federica's point a moment ago. It's not just the cost of that, it's the ongoing cost afterwards, which then contributes as well to, you know,
making it a business case,
yes,
for the
a business case, thank you. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. It's not just the first step. It is everything ongoing after that. Let's take some questions. Let's take this gentleman here, down in the middle here. Gentleman with his hand up, and then come over here. Shall I see another hand? Another hand there. Right, lots of hands.
Very good. Is it working? Oh, very good. Mike Parr with PWR. Yeah, I have a question about where does money come from? And apparently there's no public money, only taxpayer money. And that took me back about 40 years to when Thatcher came out with that particular meme. So I think everybody can see what I'm holding up. And who exactly prints this? Who? Well, it's the European Central Bank. And if I tried to print one, well, I'd probably go to jail. So we now established quite firmly exactly who produces money in the European Union. And Draghi, your fellow countryman, was asked back in, I think it was 2016, can the European Central Bank ever run out of money? It's actually on YouTube. And he said, no, we have resources to meet any emergency. And now the conversation I've seen here is as if, you know, God, the piggy bank's empty. You know, well, look, you know, we got no money. There's only, there's limited, I'm just making sure I've not lost me 50 euro notes. There's only a limited amount of money. And sure, the way things are set up at the moment, yes, there is. The member states have got to stick to the Maastricht criteria. And you're talking about money in terms of what the member states can spend. But Draghi himself has said that the ECB in Frankfurt has infinite amounts of money. They were giving to the bankers back in 2016, giving €60 billion a month. That's a matter of public record. So I'm suggesting that the debate as it stands is extremely narrow. You're missing the one organisation that has vast amounts of money. And I'm kind of curious why.
Okay, so by the way, I'm very impressed to actually find someone who actually still has cash on them. Particularly a €50 note, but anyway. Yeah, so you know, looking at finance in a different way, where the money comes from. Stefan, do you want to, or would you rather not?
Well, let's make the ECB pay. ECB pay. No, it's of course monetary policy, so which is independent.
But is this not an emergency? That was the point.
Well, it's not an emergency. It's a generational challenge. We have more than 2.5 decades to make this work. And these are investments. It's not to be solved with monetary policy instruments.
Okay.
It's based on sound public finance and the proper allocation of resources in society. So I mean, monetary policy is not to be used for that. So.
Okay, Ellen, let me come to you, and then I think we had a question here. We'll come to you next, and then okay, Ellen.
Yes, thanks, Mike, for the question. It actually reminds me of a discussion that happened a few years ago during the last revision of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. And one of the discussion points were, can we allow, for example, public local authorities to not write the investments in renovation programs as a debt? Because, as Stefan was saying, it's an investment in the future. It should not appear as a debt. And I think there was a solution found. It's changing the rules, I think, in how you declare that to Eurostat. But there are ways to change the way you're declaring an investment, which remains the same on the ground, but is not viewed the same way, whether it's an investment or a debt. And just in addition, something I wanted to say at the start, but forgot, it's actually also about redirection of financing streams. So still within the framework, but I still find it's really important and quite a milestone achieved in this Buildings Directive revision. And it's coming actually quite soon, as of the 1st of January 2025. There should be no more public subsidies for fossil fuel boilers. And I think with all that money, that could be redirected to building renovation programs, deep renovation, and rolling out renewable heating technologies.
Okay, thank you. It's lady down here with a question. Blue shirt, thank you.
Hello. Hello, I'm Simona Marcu from ENCHOG. I am particularly happy to hear, to see rural areas brought to focus, even as from our surprised guest, from our surprised panelist. And it's been a while since this topic has been analyzed in a forum like this one, and I'm happy to have the European Commission here, Mr. Moser, because maybe it's a bit of a gullible question, but we see a lot of rural dwellings connected only to electricity, not to gas, using firewood to heat, and I'm wondering, is there any policy directed at deploying heat pumps in rural areas, buildings in rural areas? Why I ask this, especially after hearing Mr. Bresti saying that he had to destroy his house and how that's not viable in old buildings and even new but bigger buildings. I'm just wondering whether this could be an instrument directed somewhere where they could be more easily installed. Thank you.
Thank you. Just a short answer from yourself?
In principle, there's no program to do anything specific for anything. What is required is a kind of case-based analysis of what needs to be improved in a building, a type of building, or a neighborhood, for instance. What are the priorities? This needs to be established, and looking also at the assets, how to create zero-emission buildings, which is somehow an optimization between energy demand and zero-carbon energy, so renewable energy or also nuclear energy, for instance, and to find the right balance and see really what are the solutions for this building or this type of building or that neighborhood. Yeah. So and we don't have any, I would say, all-encompassing programs or ideas what needs to be done. It's rather what improve for which building, type of building or neighborhood, in which sequence, in order to decarbonize that part of the building stock. And that is basically the challenge here. So, and of course, rural areas have different starting points. They have access to different assets, and these assets should be used. So, and the objective is decarbonization. So we have also complete openness to technologies in that respect. Whatever is useful for those. So, and of course, in many cases, as Elena initially said, we need to bring down energy demand, energy needs of that building, because even if you have an old-style fossil fuel-based heating system, the first thing often is to reduce the need for heating it, so energy, so whatever it is, so that can often be the first step. The heating system itself is another aspect, but therefore, this is the crucial question: case-based analysis, hard facts, what shall I do, in which sequence? This is what citizens need to know through the one-stop shops, the advisors, in order to basically have a reasonable approach to that building and see whether to improve it in one go or in a sequence in renovation steps over the years to make it more manageable.
Well, I'm sure the guest sitting to your left would say that they have the answer on this one.
Well, no, we don't have the answer on that in particular, but I can give you at least a bit of an understanding as to why, let's say, you won't see much of this renovation to moving towards a heat pump. And I think it's quite simple. You have, in rural areas, many homes that are truly intergenerational, that are very old, in which you see the case where a renovation for that house to be compliant with, or to be able to use a heat pump, would far outweigh the cost of the home, the value of the home itself. And as Federica said, making a business case and making it actually a viable investment, that's really where the challenge is. We're not necessarily saying that, therefore, heat pumps don't work. It's really the question of what's the situation of the building and the family and the owner in that case. And we agree that, you know, at a first basis, you need to make sure that you address efficiency, however that might be, and take a look at what opportunities and what technologies are available to you at that point. Let's say you're using a boiler. If you find something that is a fuel that is a drop-in solution to that, I think that's the first point to start looking at. And I guess we might have some different opinions on that. No.
Yeah. Can I just take a question down here, and then gentleman there, a lady here. Actually, I promised to go to you first, and I'm very aware of time. You can keep it quite short for me.
Sorry about that. My name is Kees van der Leun of Common Futures. I have a question about hybrid heat pumps, because I think we're about to run into big issues in distribution grids. We have 100 million homes with gas connections in Europe. They traditionally have quite weak electricity grids. So if you introduce a random number of heat pumps across all streets, then pretty soon you'll meet the saturation points in many streets at the same time. And you have to redo the electricity grids of many, many streets in a couple of years. So shouldn't there be much more focus on the solution of a hybrid heat pump, where you add a small heat pump to your gas-fired boiler, where the gas-fired boiler can take care of the peaks and thus avoid this big problem that we're about to face?
Thank you. Francesco, you caught my eye on that one.
Yeah, regarding electricity grids, right, 7-6 years ago, we were investing in the range of 50 to 60 million. We are currently in the range of 250, okay? And if you look at Europe, the expectation is for a foot bill of 600 billion euros in investment in electricity grid until 2030. And it makes it for more than 2,000 euro per house, okay? And currently, the average investment in Europe is much lower. In Italy, it's less than 100, okay? So certainly there is a big upgrade in electrical networks needed, and heat pumps have to follow this. You are absolutely right. We are in a situation where there are cases in which condominiums ask for, you know, a bigger connection in order to install a heat pump, and we cannot rely on it. And we say, okay, in 2 years we will come. But as of today, it's not possible. So this will certainly happen. Hybrid could be a solution, or either still gas is the only answer. Okay. That's why we are also investing a lot in district heating, because we think it's a big opportunity there.
Just a couple of words from you, Federica?
Yeah, just to say, if this works, yeah, just to say that indeed hybrids are very much an interesting technology that grew also very much alongside heat pumps, in particular in 2022. In our wonderful report, you have a special insert on hybrids, and the two countries that are really pushing on that technology are Italy, with a single, in a box, let's say, hybrid, and the Netherlands, where this has now been accepted as, or actually the government has decided it to be, let's say, the standard for the new installations. So we think this is really important, because we will not have 100% electrification of buildings in 2050. That all reports, all scenarios are saying. So you need to have both, and this is an intelligent solution, because it combines both worlds and avoids a lot of costs for society in general, particularly for the electricity grid reinforcements that you would need otherwise.
Double points for mentioning your report twice.
I know, I don't know if...
Very good. I'm going to take one final question, and actually I have promised that a little while ago I would come to this lady down here, so my apologies. I said yes, and then I went elsewhere. So if we can just get a microphone here. There are networking drinks later, and I am sure all panelists will be happy to take questions on more of a one-to-one basis. If you could just make it a short question for me.
Yeah, I'll try. Thank you for remembering. So my name is Stefania Bostan. I'm representing Daimita. It's a very, very interesting discussion. And also the previous one was interesting. You've discussed about how to reach net zero. You discussed about the challenges of the grid. Someone even asked a rhetorical question: how do we make sure that the renewable energy reaches everyone? We know there are around 68 million boilers out there that are running on fossil fuels. So my question is, and it would be very, very easy to switch these boilers to renewable liquid gases, such as bio-LPGs or renewable dimethyl ether, RDME. So my question is, how do we make sure that this technology neutral concept is actually transposed at member state level, and all technologies are regarded when we are talking about reaching net zero, off-grid including?
Okay, thank you. Is there anyone in particular you would like to hear from?
Well, I believe Mr. Moser.
Yeah. See, I preferred to have you say that rather than...
Yeah. And also...
Let's just get a couple of words from Stefan, if I may.
I think I can only continue where my previous panelists stopped. Hybrid solutions, combined solutions, peak management will be very important to look at least for the transition. For the long term, we don't know yet whether it will be useful to have basically combined solutions even beyond 2050. But we will have to expand grids, but in a way which takes into account how much can be done by intelligent, smart demand flexibility, demand response, and what are the appropriate sources of energy in particularly challenging situations such as cold winters. So how do we manage that in order to avoid stress on the system, therefore ensure energy security? And that may well call for combined solutions even beyond 2050, where otherwise it would not be ensured. And of course, the objective being decarbonization, meaning also that also the energy will be decarbonized or at least compensated for if they are not fully decarbonized. So that, I think, is what would also be in line with what you call technology neutral approach. It's about the objectives of decarbonization, energy security, affordability, that we need to assess what is the best combined solution for each building or type of building, city, neighborhood, or rural area.
It is a question, thank you for your question. It's a question that has come up before, and I know it will be discussed with so many people having different views. Sadly, we are out of time on this particular panel. But ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to thank my panelists from different parts of the industry with all their opinions, thank you. Thank you so much. We're actually going to go straight into our next panel now. So if I could ask these panelists to very quickly make their way just to the left-hand side of the stage, literally just there. And they will have their microphones removed from them as if by magic. My next set of panelists, I am hoping, are making their way over to that area as well. See, this is the sort of stuff that you normally see or you don't see backstage. So we're doing a very quick microphone change. While we are doing that, let me remind you we have some networking drinks after this third panel. And you can meet some of Eurogas's partners as well. Any of the videos that we've been taking during today's conference as well will be distributed at a later date as well. So anything that you've missed or you wish to forward on to a colleague, you will be able to. I think we're doing very well. Look at this, we're nearly there. So the next panel, we'll be talking about transport and mobility. Full mobility. And I know that this has come up quite a few times already, so we'll get into this in a bit more depth. How are we doing? Fabulous. I'm just going to give them a moment to sort their microphones out. Lovely. This looks to me like we are ready. Fabulous. Okay, great. So let's move on now to transport and the role that gas may play in transport. And we're looking at all different types of transport now. So please welcome from right across the sector. First of all, we have Eddie Liégeois, Acting Director of Investment, Innovative and Sustainable Transport at DG Move. Eddie, thank you very much for joining us. We have Nelly Nicoli, the CEO of LNG. Nelly, thank you very much. Come and take your place. We have Wilhelmina Westerlaken, European Affairs Manager at the Port of Rotterdam. Great to have you here. And Nadège Leclerc, Senior Director from Westport Fuel Systems. Ladies and gentlemen, our panelists. Nadège, you want to come and take this one? There we are. Lovely. Thank you very much. Thank you. Wonderful. Thank you. And we have an extra panelist to pick as well, our audience stakeholder. What have we got? Oh, okay. Not so much shuffling around with this one. Thank you very much. So, our final panelist. Okay, lovely. So, joining our panel to talk about transport, the head of EU affairs at OCI Global. Please welcome Felisa Mester. Do we have her? Oh.
He's gone.
I tell you what, she took one look at the rest of you and she thought, she is somewhere. She's going to be highly embarrassed when she realizes we're talking about her. Is she having a cup of coffee? Okay, we'll start. And if she arrives, can you send her this way? Fabulous. Thank you very much. As we have been doing throughout the panelists, if you can take just a couple of minutes now to talk about your particular part of the sector. We're looking at transport, we're looking at gas within the transport sector, the whole area of mobility. And Eddie, I wonder whether you would like to start for us.
Very fine, and many thanks for transmitting all your energy to the panelists.
Well, I will do my best. A big round of applause for our last panelist. That's all right. You were picked out of the hat and you'd gone for a cup of coffee. So, sorry, Eddie, just pause for one moment. Why did you want to join this panel?
It works. Great. Well, we're a major clean fuel producer, and well, currently the transport sector in the European Union is probably the only, but I'll say the largest regulated sector for clean fuels. Definitely one to tap into. Very important for our company, and it's a great opportunity to speak along all these.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, look, I'm glad you're here. Thank you for joining us. Thank you. Right, Eddie, my apologies. Right, so take a couple of minutes. Tell us from your point of view how you see the future of gas in transport.
Yeah, thank you. And first of all, many thanks for your invitation. I would say that I'm quite new in the business as I'm head of unit for TEN-T, so transport infrastructure, but as you said, acting director since January, in particular on fuels. So what are the main objectives that we try to achieve? I think we have to start with the main objective. First, I think it's quite clear that we need to decarbonize the economy and in particular transport. You had colleagues from me here on the stage. As far as transport, it's a big challenge, having in mind that if we look at the figures compared to 90, we are still well above, around 20% above the emission of 90. So let's say we are not yet on the path towards reducing emission in the field of transport. So a big effort there. There is a second element that is very important, in particular since the war in Ukraine. That's our security of supply or independence, in particular from natural gas from Russia. And that's one of the objectives of the REPower to, I would say, build independence of the EU industry. Now, how to do that? And I looked at the agenda and I read this sentence, gas in transport, road to everywhere. So a little bit wondering what it means. It could mean, but I don't know you yet very well, that, okay, we are producing green energy, green sources of energy, so let's use these sources wherever we can in all sectors. And probably there, it will not be a surprise for you that it's not really the way we see I would say the best use of green source of energy. Energy is scarce, in particular green energy, so we should make the best use of these sources of energy, taking into account in particular the constraints of certain sectors, and not only in transport, but we have to have the whole picture. So I'm here for transport, but for sure I represent the Commission, and we have to look at the different sectors, the constraints in the different sectors, transport, housing, and industry. So looking now a little bit at two specific sources of energy, so biomethane, for sure, produced with waste and residues. I think that we have a clear objective at EU level. You know that there is an EU target to have 35 billion cubic meters of biomethane produced by 2030, which we consider a huge challenge, considering that today the production is around 4 billion cubic meters, which means, if my figures are correct, investment in a range of 37 billion euro to arrive to this to this figure. So then comes where to use this energy, this new energy that I would say that we aim to produce. And in transport, we consider that we should use biomethane where it is most needed, and we consider that it is most needed more in particular in the maritime sectors, because it's, I would say, vessels cannot be changed even in a decade. For sure, we cannot go for electric vessel. We have put very strong targets in the Fuel EU Maritime for the decarbonization of vessels. So we consider that we should make the best use of biomethane in particular, not only, but in particular, as far as transport in maritime. Now, as far as hydrogen, there as well, we have clear objective to increase the production of green, renewable hydrogen, with a plan to have by 2030 10 million tons produced in the EU. And we also, and I see that they are representative of ports, so that's very important to also promote the imports of hydrogen of, I would say, around the same volume. Again, that's very important for transport, where to best use this hydrogen, green hydrogen. There, we are quite open. If you look at the alternative fuel regulation, we, I would say, promote also the use of hydrogen in the road. But again, we would like to see hydrogen, apart the use of industry, I would say having a focus where it is most needed, in particular for the production of e-fuels for SAF in aviation, again, to meet the target of aviation. And I can tell you that both the maritime and the aviation sector are, I would say, arguing a little bit, not against, but putting a little bit pressure on us, the Commission, on this, I would say, objective that we have put on them to decarbonize the sectors, both for maritime and for aviation. And that's a little bit the reason why we see this not an obligation, but this approach to really try to make the best use of what we will produce in terms of biomethane and hydrogen. So I would say we are fully behind you, if I may say, with this I would say, approach of making the best use of scarce energy, I would say.
Eddie, thank you very much. Thank you. It is interesting, so I'm sure the whole room is very aware the number of times that we hear we have to make the best use of something, and that's being said in so many different topics. In other words, you know, there's only so much to go around, and there's a lot of people that want to get their hands on, you know, the biomethane, the hydrogen, and the like. Thank you very much. Eurogas has suggested a 1-minute question at the end of all of your interventions. So with just 1 minute, Eddie, is the current EU regulatory framework for transport sufficient to deliver significant progress on decarbonising the sector by 2040?
I would say we have, I think, given a clear line. That's, I would say, the responsibility as a regulator. And we have done, and that was a big task under this commission, that was part of the Green Deal. We have made proposal, alternative fuel regulations, I would say, for road, but not only, because we also include decarbonization at short side for I would say, in ports. So we have this piece of legislation which set clear targets, obligations for the member states to develop alternative fuels, and then 2 specific pieces of legislation for aviation, SAF, and to decarbonize maritime, so the vessels which call at EU ports. So I think that's very important, because with this, we hope that we will, let's say, create the market. Okay. We have to give a clear guidance, I would say, so that the industry will know where to invest. So I think that this first layer is done.
Okay, that's your minute. Okay, you say you're giving clear guidance. Yes or no? Is it sufficient?
It is not sufficient.
Okay.
We complement this, let's say, regulatory approach with industry initiative. So if we take hydrogen, we have, and it's responsibility of DG Move, an alliance of, I would say, industry to try to promote different solutions for the production in the EU, but also for the import, or to facilitate the import of hydrogen in the EU. So no, it's not sufficient. We create the market, we create the conditions, and indeed we have to to the best extent possible, but it's not only the responsibility of the EU, for sure, that's also the industry to make the investment and to make the necessary steps, I would say.
Eddie, thank you very much. Let's move now to LNG. I'm very pleased to say that we have the CEO, Nelly Nicoli, with us. So just a few minutes to give us your views, your thoughts on gas in transport.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm totally agreeing on the your last answer to the minute question, as to everybody needs to be moving forward to create the market and find the solutions to decarbonize the transport. I will give a view on the infrastructure, existing infrastructure. So today we import LNG in terminals in France, but we're already also working a lot around offers for the transport to help our customers to decarbonize the transport on the maritime part and also on the road. So what are we doing today? We are increasing significantly our offers in bunkering, so truck-to-ship services to allow maritime transport to be on LNG and not on diesel, and also directly bunkering to charge bunker vessels. And it's the first step. It's immediately available, and it decarbonizes, and it's very positive also on the air impact, quality of the air. But what we really think is that we are very near, and it starts now, to be at the level of the bio-LNG, so the biomethane, which is liquefied, to help our customers in transport, in maritime transport, and also road, to decarbonize. It's a neutral carbon solution. There are two ways to do that. The first one is to do real physical liquefaction, which can be the case, and we're doing tests on our terminals. And the second one, which is an easy one, is also to make liquefaction by equivalent, which is guarantees of origins with biomethane, which is injected in the grid, and that our customers can have directly in their terminals to put on bunker vessels or to go to refueling stations for the road. So this is very easy to have, let's say, technically, regulatory aspects, on the regulatory aspects. And it's also the first step towards e-methane, liquefied e-methane, which can be another way to really decarbonize, which is certainly a bit more far in the calendar, but not so far, okay? It's possible. So it's just to say that today we are already having offers that decarbonize the transport. Tomorrow, very near, could be bio, LNG, and maybe methane. And for an infrastructure, in this gas industry, it's to say we have an existing infrastructure. We must make the best use of it. Today, it had an insurance role during the energy crisis. Tomorrow, it can be also a strategic asset everywhere in Europe to help to be logistic hubs for green molecules that are imported or exported. And for example, we are working on H2, principally with ammonia carriers, to import ammonia and then have H2. But we're also working to transform or adapt our terminals to be exporters of CO2 and be part of the CCUS value chain. So it's great topics. And what I would just finish with is we are investing, we are supporting our customers. The regulatory framework goes forward, and it's very good. And we really need to be all together to continue the investments that we do, try to be consistent also, to have a very stable, very clear path and regulatory framework to help our customers to invest.
Thank you. Just as a very quick one, when are you anticipating e-methane?
In our view, but
yeah,
it's just one view, and I guess everybody's got a different view. But we're more towards the 2040, between 2030 and 2040, actually, for the e-methane.
Okay. Your question with a minute to answer. LNG is often sort of regarded as a bit of a transitional fuel. And then you'll get critics saying, hang on, LNG just means you're locking in fossil fuels. So how do you... I mean, what's your take on that? And how do you ensure that the gas-based infrastructure investments are still those that go towards the long-term decarbonisation goals?
Well, actually, we're in an environment, in a society, where there are a lot of things that makes us go toward a transition. We have to go to the transition, and everybody in the company wants to go to the transition. So we are working right now for innovative solutions. I gave you one example with the bio-LNG, and we are putting a lot of investment on that to push, okay? Not to say, okay, let's think LNG will remain stable for many years and we will always need LNG as fossil fuel. No, we are working on the new solutions for tomorrow. And then afterwards, I think we don't need to be gas ashamed. There's a history. Why are we here? Why did we start with fossil gas at first? And it's a history, our parents' history, our economics in Europe. We see that it gives us a certain number of services today. It has had a very specific role during the energy crisis for security of supply, which was a good thing. Tomorrow, it can help also in flexible, because peaks will be still there, and there will be some hazards, and this type of energy can really help on that. But we need to transform it, that is true, and we're putting all our efforts on that. So I think we're on the right track.
All right, thank you very much, thank you. Really great to have the Port of Rotterdam with us today, and looking forward to your examples from shipping and how the port itself is operating as well. Huge port. Willemijn, take a couple of minutes to talk us through.
Yeah, thanks first of all for the invitation and having me here representing Port of Rotterdam. I also thought it would be helpful also for you, because maybe you know the Port of Rotterdam by name, but to explain a little bit why we would be in such a panel at the first place. We are the biggest port in Europe still, but people, I think, associate that at first with shipping, logistic operations, but I think here it's also good to emphasize that apart from being a logistical hub, we're also an energy hub. We host or harbor the most, or one of the bigger industrial clusters in Europe as well, with a large petrochemical industry. Yeah, when it comes to shipping, we receive approximately towards 100,000 inland vessels a year, 30,000 seagoing vessels. So we are the second biggest bunkering port in the world after Singapore. So we are right in the middle of this energy transition in many, many ways, which is also why for years we've been looking at ways how do we make sure that we, as a port, are able to maintain our position, of course, but do that in a sustainable way. And I think it's important for to mention that here for us, and it's been mentioned by a couple of you, so I think the future is a multi-fuel future. We see that we don't have, or logistics, neither industry, neither they have the luxury to exclude any. So we as a port need to be able to facilitate whatever the market asks from us. But that means that we, in certain types or parts of the port, invest in infrastructure, make sure that we can facilitate certain processes. And, well, LNG, you mentioned a couple of examples. We have, actually last week, the biggest biobunkering so far has taken place in Rotterdam. Some of our customers or clients within the port, like Gate Terminal, they have been working with LNG for years now, initially starting as import, but also because of the shipping industry and the changes that have happened, turning into a re-export terminal as well. So you do see that we're able to quite flexibly deal with changes that come up and also respond to it. And I think that you mentioned the point of LNG being a transition fuel. Yes, we also strive towards more sustainable, renewable alternatives like bio-LNG. I think it's very feasible because, at least in the Port of Rotterdam, the infrastructure is there. We know how to facilitate the process. We've been, well, have had some experience with that so far. And we do not do that as a standalone. As a port, we cannot decide on these things alone because there's many, many other stakeholders involved. So we are also trying to look at what future pathways do we see at all, because there's still quite some, especially when it comes to shipping, quite some uncertainty in what will be the most viable fuel for the future, so to put it. So we're working with academia, with authorities as well, both on a European and national level, and also, of course, business, to see what's the most interesting business case. I would say until 2030, for sure, that would be LNG, but I would also want to say let's use the time that we have then to develop the alternatives, so that when FuelEU Maritime will, gradually kick in and require more from the maritime industry, that they are also actually able to, to make that shift. And as a port, we can only try to facilitate it as much as we can.
Ports are. We talked about skills earlier as well. Ports are the most amazing hub for skills as well, with a different and changing industry needs there. You started to touch on it, but I'm going to give you a minute to talk about alternative fuels. What infrastructure are you looking at? When do you hope things might come to fruition in that part of the industry? What are your customers saying? What are you working on? Take a minute.
There's a lot, because you want me to go modality by modality, because that can take me a while. Maybe I'll just focus on the two, say road transport and the maritime, because that's where I think it's quite concrete. So road transport, we're trying to facilitate electrification as much as we can. We have actually opened up a couple of charging stations in the past year, I must say, so things are going very, very fast there. Same actually goes for onshore power supply, but that's only, for vessels that are not moving. And for bunkering, it's LNG, bio-LNG, and then the methanol comes in, of course. I would say, and that really, it's maybe not even for me to say, because it really depends on the market dynamics, but we want to be ready as soon as we can, so 2030s, towards 2035, 2040 would be great. But there's a lot of variables that come in there, I think, so yeah.
I think the phrase was used earlier in another panel about chicken and egg, and that, I think, is probably what you're suggesting as well. Yes, that what the market wants, but you've got to be ready, particularly if you're maintaining your place within Europe, and actually the world, actually, when it comes to the size of your port. And it's different facets. Thank you, really interesting. Let's turn to Westport Fuel Systems. Nadej, take a few minutes. Give us your view on this, where you see yourself in the market and where you think the market is going.
Yeah, well, you asked the question, gas in transport, roadshow everywhere? We would answer yes, as a supplier of alternative fuel systems and components for vehicles. That's really our world. I'll focus more on road transport maybe for now. If we see it definitely as a road to achieving the EU 2040 climate targets. If we just take a look at what this communication says about transport, if just looking at the scenario 3, the one promoted by the Commission, we want to have carbon neutral, zero greenhouse gas fuel supply by 2040 and 75% renewable energy. And all the scenarios actually consider that there will be an important role to play for alternative fuels, of course, with a lot of renewable fuels. So that sets the scene for gaseous fuels in general. There was already some discussion about AFIR, the targets for infrastructure that are there pretty much, and a lot of alternative fuel infrastructure that is here already as well. If we look at the vehicle side now, for cars and vans, the CO2 standards for vehicles are basically targeting more or less a ban of new internal combustion engine vehicles by 2035. So limits the role for gaseous fuels, obviously. But there's still an opening on that for vehicles running exclusively on carbon neutral fuels. And we think it's important to keep that because we have, for example, LPG, CNG, both vehicles and infrastructure available today, and we should take advantage of that to decarbonize already today with what is available without just waiting on electrifying everything. Buses, we have similar policy targets, but when we look at the market, there are actually really big bus operators who are still investing a lot, really believing in biomethane and continuing to invest in biomethane to decarbonize their fleet today. So that's also a really important signal from the market. And for trucks, there's clearly a market already for CNG and LNG biomethane trucks with some level of maturity already, with infrastructure vehicles and fleets that are satisfied. So it's a really good basis to go further. And hydrogen, as it has been discussed a little bit already, with clear targets and a lot to come really in the next 5-10 years. Plus, that's for new vehicles, but we should not forget either that we can retrofit existing vehicles to these different alternative fuels, whether it's cars, trucks, and we're also seeing regaining interest in that with hydrogen as a way to start easily with hydrogen. So on the vehicle side, the solutions are here, also the infrastructure, and we have to use what is available as well.
Let me give you a minute on this. The question Eurogas would like to put to you is that, you know, as the demand for hydrogen, biomethane grows, do you not see a real competition between the different end users that actually will stymie the market?
You mean the end users in transport or of the different sectors?
No, the different things, so industry, in heating.
There will clearly be a competition, and it's actually part of the question today. When we look at hydrogen, we don't really know how much hydrogen will be available for transport, because there will be a lot needed also for industry and for different uses. So transport needs some of it, but that's also part of why there's not one single solution to decarbonize transport, rather a mix, and depending on specific cases, one or the other will be the most appropriate.
Thank you. That was well within your minute. I like the which will be the most appropriate. It is a phrase we've heard so often of different people sort of say, well, you take the best case example at the time. Felicia, our extra guest on the end, our extra audience panelist, what do you make of what you've heard?
Sorry, it's interesting. I came actually with the other thoughts, but now that I've heard everything that I've heard, there are quite a lot of comments that I have. So one is that it's interesting that from the Commission side, of course, it sounds like we have two pillars. One that is, let's say, biomethane-based fuels, and the other is hydrogen-based fuels. So in a way, it's a bit strange how we do have RFNBO targets for industry. We have RFNBO targets for transport, but suddenly we're missing the biomethane-based fuel targets. So it appears that there is a mismatch somehow there, and I must say, when we look at the road transport, well, especially because it's more of a historical regulated market in a way. It is truly a success story that we have a regulated market, that we have sustainability targets. The industry, of course, is very happy to have that pie to share in between ourselves. But it is a major driver for sustainability projects in this area. So somehow we do have the 35 BCM. It's great. It's a great ambition. Likewise, the 10 million tons of green hydrogen is a great ambition. Unfortunately, not so many projects that we actually see happening right now due to, as the industry, I will allow myself to say over-regulation slightly. But on the biomethane side, I really wonder why do we have such a mismatch in a way in between these two different clear pillars, as you've mentioned yourself. It's also very interesting that certification was mentioned, right? The virtual liquefaction and how that works via GOs. And here as well, there's so many questions that we see right now in the space of certification altogether. Of course, the entire GO debate, where we see that some member states are implementing it very quickly. We see that other member states are a bit lacking behind. But another debate and running in parallel almost in a way links us again very much to regulated markets, and that is the implementation of the union database. And again, it's somehow strange because personally, we are the largest global biomethanol producer. And we have been importing and producing here in Europe for the past decade. Somehow now we find ourselves in a situation where DG ENER is doing some changes to certification, and we're essentially seeing our RED compliant fuels being well, I don't want to say I don't want to use very strong words, but let's say paralyzed from accessing the market. And again, somehow the question is, why doesn't DG ENER, DG Move work together in order to make sure that those exact targets in Refuel EU, in road transport, in RED, are that we can tap into them and we can actually meet them?
Did you want to come back in on that, Eddie, just very briefly? Or would you rather not?
No, perhaps we have nothing, I would say, to the use of biomethane, but sometimes you are criticized that we do not give a clear direction. As you said, it's a little bit the chicken and egg, and I would say to be able to give this direction, we have, for example, if we take road in the alternative fuel regulation. By the way, we have also included hydrogen, but indeed, there is a clear obligation for the member states to deploy recharging station. We cannot, I would say, put obligation on the member states if the obligations are not clear. They cannot invest everywhere. But this being said, we are not against the use of liquid fuels, in particular in a transition phase. That's also something that we have to keep in mind. So there is the transition phase. You made also the point for LNG. Fine, we need to use, I would say, all the available sources. But it is also true that if we look really the long-term future, if we want to give a clear signal to the industry, for example, to the car industry, for the truck industry, then we need also to be coherent, consistent in our message, in particular in terms of deployment of the necessary infrastructure for the different type of fuels. We do not prohibit any fuels. That's very important. But it's true that we have made, I would say, a choice to, let's say, put the accelerator on certain fuels, or for road, I would say, to put an accelerator on electricity, so recharging.
Okay, thank you. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to open the floor straight away for questions, because I know that this is an area people feel actually strongly but very interested in as well. So we've got microphones in the room. Do I have any questions straight away? We've got a gentleman down here. Anyone else at the moment? Okay, let's take your question, sir.
Thank you. It's very interesting. My name is Patrick Wallier, and I'm from the small company, tiny company, G&T Management. I have always, in this type of debate, the similar question. No single word about the wind energy. Everybody can be laughing. I see that you look at me like a Martian. But I mean, that's something that exists, that works, and that also rely on proven technologies. I don't tell you that you could do shipping only with the wind energy, but you could avoid spending quite a lot high amount of energy.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're not talking about energy produced by wind, you're talking about
propulsion,
shipping.
shipping.
So you're talking about sailing.
Yes, yes,
yeah,
yes.
Just be quite clear on that one.
And my question, I see, would be more for Mr. Liégeois, because his investment innovative and sustainable transport, DG Move. I mean, this type, I never seen any mention, single words about that, thereabout. And I know that some companies like DHL or other companies are thinking about it. I know that even I would imagine, and I think I have some indication that Apple, so the computer, are also thinking about it. If they change all their packaging with cardboard, with carton, how do you call it?
Let me put it to Willemijn, if I may, because you are very close to that sort of industry, and you have lots of your different clients, your customers, working on different types of technology. You know, is that something that is still within a mix or not, or?
For sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, you asking the question, but you probably also know that there's work being done towards at least trying to decide if going back to sailing. It looks a little bit different, though, if you would look it up. It's a very spacey ship that you're looking at, and I always feel like, but it's definitely a technology that might be used. I didn't mention it here in the context of this particular panel, but I think the point here is that it's another example of the fact that especially maritime industry has to use all available technologies to make sure that the energy that they have at their availability is used where it's really needed. And there might be some routes where in certain cases such a technology could be applied, but for these types of technologies, and there's many others, shipping industries working towards, you know, using the innovations they have, but it's costly, it's risky. Yeah, but you've heard that before today, probably. So.
Well, no, but it's very good to hear your view from someone who actually is within the port environment. Thank you. Do we have other? There's a question over here. If we can get a microphone to this gentleman here. Did I see another hand on this side as well? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. As I'm from Estonia, I would like to ask a following question. In our region, like Eastern Baltic, Gulf of Finland, there was a lot of effort in transitioning from marine oil to LNG, but all the efforts stalled once the LNG price went to the skies, and we are talking about conventional LNG. So the question is, now once we are talking about supporting alternative fuels, which are so far even more expensive, even biomethane, than conventional LNG, what do you see, how would you see measures in order to succeed in transition from the conventional fuels to the new fuels? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone in particular that you want to hear an answer from?
I would say that it would be interesting to hear all the opinions.
Okay, but Nelly, did you? that's a tall ask, sir. Nelly, do you want to start with that one?
Yes, it's true. You're right that the gas price is a key topic, because if it's too high, it has been a question in one of the previous panel. What is the right price of the gas? Okay, yeah, exactly. So when it's too high, you see that truck loadings of LNG stops, that bunkering reduces, and so there's a question of right competitivity, so that the transport sectors have a stable perspective. I would say that the regulatory framework can really give an answer, because it can help by other measures to amplify or incentive on certain things, and especially on bio-LNG right now. There's a lot of things that can be done through the regulation. And afterwards, there's also the prices of the CO2 or the tax on emissions. That will be another way also to be able to give incentive, actually, to the transport sector to use bio-LNG, for example, if it's the case, even though there are maybe some variations between the prices.
We could refer there to the proposal of the Commission to revise the taxation directive, to link it to, that's a little bit along the line that you say, to link it to the CO2. So a tax incentive can certainly be very powerful, but there, with the proposal, it's unanimity for the member states to decide, and it's on the table, I think, for many years now. But it's certainly one way to address the question. But yeah, I don't know if I catch exactly the question. That's one thing. So I wanted to provide the incentive, let's say, and there is a role there on the EU. Then the second point is to become independent in terms of energy, and I think that looking a little bit at the fossil fuels, the time of very cheap and safe energy is over. So I would say there, perhaps I would say there is really now a case for I would say all the new source of energy on which we are working much more than in the past, and I think that future will confirm this evolution and the fact that I think we are on solid basis. I would say when going on to whatever biomethane, hydrogen, leaving aside, I would say this fossil fuel, the fossil fuels.
Wilhelmine, you were nodding at the start of Eddie's answer there. What was going through your mind?
Yeah, it's the energy taxation directive you mentioned. Actually, it's and you mentioned competitivity. I explained that the Port of Rotterdam is a very big bunkering hub worldwide, and well, the negotiations as they currently are standing really put pressure on that position that we have. But as Port of Rotterdam, we're not the only port that's worried about the way fuels are going to be taxed when it comes to shipping. So we really hope that also the Belgian presidency will, try to give a boost to those discussions. But it's a very fragile situation actually, and I think that we'll be stuck with that discussion for the coming years. And I also think you mentioned implementation and different pace that is you see going on in member states, that also to a certain extent will allow for scalability, and that is, I think, also what we need when it comes to alternative fuels, to make it a more competitive fuel towards fossil alternatives.
Adesh, do you want to?
Yes, I can add more to that. As part of this picture, I think there are also topics that were addressed in some of the previous panels, and one is carbon pricing, and it's also something that will be used more in the transport sector to balance more the costs between fossil fuel and renewable fuel solutions. We have to see with ETS2 how it really comes into play in the coming years, but that's one. On the energy taxation, there's also sorry, I will first talk about funding, which was also addressed, and that's more for the new solutions. There's clearly a need for more public funding to deploy new solutions like hydrogen in transport. And this funding, so there is already funding available for the refueling infrastructure, but it has to come hand in hand with the vehicles. So we think it should be complemented by funding also for vehicles, whether these are hydrogen fuel cell vehicles or hydrogen internal combustion engine vehicles, because there will be all these solutions, and even though combustion will cost less than fuel cells, there's also a need for a little bit of support for everything to come together.
It's in a little bit of support. We've heard, again, we've heard that so many times in different panels today, talking about different areas of the industry. I think this has been a really interesting look at the future of transport, and I'm aware that we've spanned a whole area, whole different parts of that industry, but I think it's been really interesting just to see your different views and perspectives from where you sit. So, ladies and gentlemen, please thank our final panelists. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I'll let you return to your seats. Thank you. We've talked about so much today over the three panels, starting with that overview of the wider context, then moving into buildings, now ending with transport. I think it'd be really good now to get a few closing thoughts from the Director General of DG Klima. Very pleased to say that we have with us today Kurt Vandenberg. Kurt, thank you. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me at the end of what has been, I'm sure, a very rich and dense day. I sense it from the temperature in this room, that it has been hotly debated issues today. You come at the close of such a very intense day, just like we come at the close of a political cycle, which has been very rich and eventful, and we're looking forward to a next political cycle. And of course, everyone is wondering, where are we going? Or European leaders are discussing just that a few kilometers from here. And when we are looking at the next cycle, we have to also look back a little bit. When we launched the European Green Deal in 2019 as Europe's growth, innovation and investment strategy, we were surfing on a wave of public support. It seemed like the whole of Europe wanted much more climate action, but we were alone in the world. I don't know if you remember, but we had Donald Trump in the White House at the time, who had withdrawn the United States from the Paris Agreement. If we fast forward 5 years, almost 5 years, we see that the situation has reversed. We see growing worries and concerns in the European public about the cost of this transition. What will it mean for cost of living? But we're no longer alone in the world. Actually, we risk being overtaken in what we thought in 2019 is Europe's competitive advantage, clean tech and green economy. We know in the United States with the IRA how much this is attracting interest from investors. And we see that China is investing more in renewable energy than the rest of the world combined. 58% of the addition of renewable energy last year was in China alone. And you all know what strategy China has for its growth model in the future. One of conquering the export markets that are increasingly on clean tech and green products and services. So what it means to us is that succeeding in our clean and green transition is no longer only an ecological existential issue. It has become maybe even more an economic one and a security one. And we have no choice but to stay the course on what we have launched in 2019. And that will also appear from the conclusions that our European leaders will adopt, hopefully today, with a lot of focus on competitiveness, but not at all questioning the need for going to climate neutrality. Quite to the contrary. Actually, the goal of climate neutrality, which is in our climate law, has now been acquis. It is no longer discussed because we need to do it. The question now is not if we do this transition, the question is how we do it. And I'm sure this is also at the heart of the discussions you've had today. I witnessed a little bit of the last panel, and that's exactly the kind of debates that we now need. And it's good to remind everyone that we are on track. We have reduced emissions in the EU by more than 35% since 1990, while our economy grew by 67%. So we are decoupling since 3 decades our economic growth from pollution. We're making progress also very recently. We were very impressed ourselves by the latest figures from the emission trading system, which showed that in 2023, in 1 year, our economy reduced emissions by 15%. in the ETS sectors. And we only need 4.4% reduction per year to meet our targets by 2030. That is in large part due to the increase of renewable energy, also reduction of demand, and also, we have to acknowledge this, due to a reduction in industrial output. And that is not a reason to be happy. That is a reason for being much more on the ball. But I would like to say that at the same time, we are seeing historically low levels of unemployment in our economy. We see that investment, private investment, is picking up as never before in the European economy. And we, in January this year, had the largest trade surplus in the Eurozone since 2002. So we are on track, but there is no reason for complacency. We have to look at where we have the pain points in our transition. We have the Fit for 55, which will get us to a minus 55% emission reduction at least by 2030. And we have recently published our 2040 climate target plan, which reaffirms our strong commitment to stay the course beyond 2030 as well. We recommend from the European Commission a 90% reduction target by 2040, which is not an expression of climate ambition. We're no longer discussing the need for climate ambition. We're discussing how best and most cost efficiently get to our goals in 2030, 2040, and eventually 2050. Now, this is, of course, an economy-wide transition, but the energy sector, from electricity to gas, is, as we all know, at the heart of this transformation. Energy-related emissions account for 77% of total greenhouse gas emissions in Europe. And it's fair to say that for the gas sector, the past few years and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia have already led to a profound transformation of the natural gas and LNG markets. You are probably much better placed than I am to say more about this. But we expect an even deeper change when it comes to our path to climate neutrality. By 2040, the consumption of natural gas in the EU is expected to reduce significantly, with renewables and electricity replacing it in final demand. The latest modeling published, together with our communication on 2040, shows that the EU's consumption of natural gas is expected to reduce at a faster pace than expected before the crisis. We expect a decrease by between 54 and 68% between 2020 and 2040. Some of this reduction will come from the replacement of gas by renewables and electricity. And for the gas that we still need, the EU is actively promoting, as you know, the uptake of renewable and low-carbon gases. The demand for these is projected to become more than twice as high as the demand for natural gas in the future. We have recently had the adoption of the hydrogen and decarbonized gas package that was agreed in December, is now going in the books, and that revised package will facilitate this uptake. It extends the scope of the regulation to renewable and low-carbon gases in the gas grids and reinforces long-term and more strategic planning of our energy system, considering electricity, gas, and hydrogen. I have to say very clearly that green molecules are an essential part of our decarbonization portfolio, specifically in remote geographical and rural areas or in sectors that are difficult to electrify. These include sustainably produced biogas and biomethane, together with other renewable gases such as renewable hydrogen. And when it comes to gases, we also need to realize that we will be consuming less but better. You have heard in the previous panels about the changes needed for industry and buildings, for example. The need for synthetic fuels for the transport sector, especially for long-haul mobility, makes acute the need to scale up renewable hydrogen production and sustainable sources of CO2. So we have many tasks ahead, all with their own set of challenges to develop these new low-carbon gases to their full scale. If we think about biogas and biomethane, their upscale of production can provide many benefits. They can promote a more circular economy by repurposing waste, decentralized production, and be a source of flexible energy. They secure the use of domestic existing energy resources in a sustainable and circular fashion as a tool to ensure our energy independence, which is also a lesson we have learned recently in the EU. And in working on this, of course, we need to keep in mind the availability of well-developed commercial technologies and good practices in the value chain, including on sustainable biomass. I think you all know that the strategic importance of biogas and biomethane was already highlighted in our 2022 Repower EU plan, and we have already seen very positive developments as a result of this. The latest figure from the European Biogas Association show that biomethane production in Europe grew by almost 20% in 2022 compared to the previous year. All of Europe's biogas production in 22 amounted to 21 billion cubic meter. And if we look at biomethane production alone, it grew from 3.5 BCM in 2021 to 4.2 BCM in 2022, while installed capacity raised to 4.5 BCM. These, ladies and gentlemen, are very promising developments that now need to be sustained to reach our goals. If we look a minute at hydrogen, its future importance in the EU energy system is now becoming increasingly evident. Renewable hydrogen can provide flexibility, storage, and buffering options for a renewables-based electricity system. Our 2040 modeling shows that it can also help tackle one of our most important dependencies to fossil fuels in the transport sector. In all our scenarios, we see the production of e-fuels, both gaseous and liquid, accounting for the lion's share of total hydrogen consumption in 2040, followed by industry and, very closely, transport. These three sectors alone, e-fuel, industry, and transport, should account for the large majority of hydrogen use by 2040. There are, of course, a lot of challenges when it comes to hydrogen. We need to acknowledge this and be open-eyed about this. We need to develop a fully fledged market way beyond the traditional use of the molecule. On the production side, we have several technologies that urgently need to be scaled up. In the EU, a number of large-scale projects have now been announced to kickstart this production. And the EU ETS Innovation Fund is funding some of the largest projects, such as Holland Hydrogen next to Rotterdam, the Rotterdam port in the Netherlands. We now have a very important and very promising project pipeline, one that we have never seen before in the European Union, and we are now streamlining the financial help needed for those renewable hydrogen plants to become reality, notably through the Hydrogen Bank. We had the first auction launched in November last year, and we will reveal the very positive results on the 30th of April in 2 weeks' time. We received more than 100 applications, representing a total of 8.8 million tons of hydrogen produced over 10 years. Again, it shows the the promise, but also the interest in the technology that is growing along with its opportunities. To create a market, we of course need a lot of innovations to develop the new uses of hydrogen beyond refineries and the chemical sectors. And that's also why we are investing with the Innovation Fund in steel plants, plants for green steel in Sweden, the hybrid and H2 green steel projects, for example, to prove these use cases. The production of synthetic fuels in a cost and energy efficient way will also demand a lot of innovation through the complex production process. One of the main challenges is to develop capture technologies and sustainable sources of CO2. The Industrial Carbon Management communication that we published at the same time as our 2040 communication gives a first strategic view on how we will help to develop this market. Ladies and gentlemen, at the dawn of a new political cycle, my message as we close this event today is that we have all it takes in Europe to succeed in the modernization and decarbonization of our economy. The two go together, modernization and decarbonization. I agree that growing productivity and raising our competitiveness are Europe's strategic priority now. But this will only happen through innovation and investment. The EU's climate agenda provides the direction and the predictability for this investment and this innovation to happen. We have discussed Europe's competitiveness for decades. But contrary to past episodes, we now see an overflowing pipeline of projects triggered by the climate imperative, which is also becoming a competitiveness and security imperative for Europe, as I said. Like Mr. Letta, who published his report today, from DG Klima, we therefore call for a strategic European approach to direct our funds to the most promising projects and technologies, and to be bold in our choices to finance breakthrough innovations. Beyond technologies, we also need to bring those solutions to consumers. Investing early and well will help bring costs down and make them affordable for European companies and citizens. Today, the gas sector, your sector, is at a junction moment, and we have an important and urgent task. While the use of natural gas is expected to decrease, we need to scale up domestic production of biogas, biomethane, and renewable hydrogen to its full sustainable production volume. This change will bring several benefits, contributing directly to the circular economy, to better waste management, and the decentralization of the future energy system. It will also bring new economic opportunities, including for new uses of hydrogen. We look forward to working together with you to transform the gas sector in line with our climate objectives. The European Green Deal is an innovation shock to our economy, but it's a shock that is long overdue. And in addressing this shock and going through it together, let us remind ourselves of what the wise old Seneca once said. It's not because things are difficult that we don't dare. It's because we don't dare that things are difficult. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Kurt van den Berg, thank you very much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention today. I'm going to leave the floor now to James Watson.
Well, we can start with a round of applause for Sasha. Yeah, Sasha, you've done a great job as ever. It's been a great pleasure to have you moderating our annual conference, and really great thanks to Kurt for coming in and giving the closing keynote. Obviously, I would be very happy if I'd have left it at certain points where he was saying that clearly there is a very strong role for green molecules in the future. That is the future of our industry, and that is important, and we have to embrace it. We might also take some disagreement, because we like to, as part of these conferences, that we say that maybe natural gas will decrease to some extent. Maybe we wouldn't necessarily see the decrease that you also foresee, but it is also reassuring that you also do recognize that it will be there in 2040. Natural gas is here for many years yet to come. We will need it. And this change in governments that we see, the Parliament and the new Commission that is coming in, we understand, because you rightly said it's hot in this room, but it's even hotter outside, 10 months in a row of record temperatures. Climate change will remain a priority, and we will have to address it. But competitiveness will also be important. And so that great question from the first panel about what's the right price for natural gas is indeed a question that we will have to think about. Because we have to understand we have a climate emergency, even if it wasn't described as such on stage, but we also have a competitiveness issue, and we have to deal with both. And we cannot deal with one and not the other, so we have to marry them. So yes, I would definitely take some of the points from Kurt. We have to innovate, and we have to make sure that we're able to move forward and deliver the energies that we need, but at the right price. And that's not just for the industries. We always think of it about industries, but it is about consumers too. And we cannot forget about people. And in the second panel, I particularly like the point that we had. There were a lot of discussions about Milan as a city, but Milan is a rich city. Then there's the rural areas. We'll need different solutions for different parts for heating. This is very clear. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, and it's going to be complicated. And actually, in the first panel, there was more talk about planning, but I think in the second panel, it might have been even more relevant. We're going to have to plan much better at local level what kind of heating systems we're going to be using and what kind of fuels we'll have. Of course, in the last panel, we did talk, I think this is one of the interesting things. In transport, there's actually no discussion about what the future of green molecules or even LNG is. It's very clear that there will be a growth of the use of molecules, I should say gaseous molecules in transport. And so it was a different kind of discussion, because it was more of a discussion about how we're going to do it, how we're going to make these things happen, how we're going to address different parts and different segments of the transport sector. I mean, there is a strong push that comes from the legislation towards electrification, but it's also very clear that in aviation, in heavy-duty vehicles, in maritime transport, you are going to need, absolutely no doubt, the green molecules that we've talked about, and very much LNG if you look at Fuel EU. This is something that we all know will be a growth area for the green molecule. And so I have to say a huge thanks to all of the panelists. These conferences are not what normal annual conferences are like. These are not messages of the gas industry. We have debate, we have disagreement, and that's what we want to see, because that's better. We have stakeholders who come in who don't agree with us, but we are always open to having conversations, because we think that it's necessary to have those conversations, and this is a good platform to do it. Let's identify where we don't agree, but let's also identify where we do agree and go forward to deliver the outcomes that we need. Now, I've been rattling on, and I know you all want to go and have a drink desperately, so I'm going to stop. But I'm going to start and ask for a round of applause for Sasha and for Kurt and for all of the panelists, and indeed for the Eurogas team, who've done a great job preparing this yet again. And I will not forget the four partners, Landwärme, CFA, A2A, and LNG, who really make these conferences possible, so a huge thanks to them. And last but by no means least, a huge thanks to you who've stayed for 3.5 hours through the conference. I greatly appreciate it. You've definitely earned your drink. I will see you outside for one myself. See you soon, and don't forget the Renewable Gas Barbecue and Renewable Gas Conference on the 4th of July. We hope to see you all then. Thank you.